Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you having good day. In this video, I am gonna talk about my student Deku. What if Deku had the silent killing quirk? Part 2. And subscribe for more, also like this video, that will be awesome, helps me to stay motivated. And thanks to the author of this story, this video is possible. So do check it out and show some love. Name of this fanfic is Fragile Web of Trust by StallKing. So do check out the author of this story and check out entire work. Also, if you have any complaints about videos, feel free to comment. Warning. I will try to improve them. This video has mature language. Let's jump in video. Izuku's eyes scanned the familiar laboratory surroundings. This time, however, he was not bound to the laboratory bed, subjected to Asmodeus's twisted experiments. No, the scene before him was one of unexpected respite, though the scars of his past remained etched upon his body. Sitting on a cold metal chair, Izuku's small form was covered in open bite wounds. The marks of his suffering were vivid and raw, a testament to the pain he had endured at the hands of the doctor and the sadistic Mammon. Yet, Izuku showed little reaction as Dr. Asmodeus tended to his injuries, applying a cloth soaked in antiseptic to the worst of his wounds. While uncomfortable, the burning sensation paled compared to the agony of the experiments he came to associate with this room. Through sheer repetition, Izuku had grown accustomed to the physical and psychological torment. He had become desensitized to the pain, numbed by the countless experiments and the torture training from Mammon. It was a coping mechanism, a way to endure the suffering that had become an integral part of his existence. As the doctor's hands moved with a strange mix of clinical detachment and peculiar care, Izuku's gaze remained fixed on a distant point, his mind a haze of resignation and survival. He had learned to separate himself from the pain, to dissociate his consciousness from the physical reality of his wounds. It was a self-preservation mechanism, a shield to protect what little of his spirit remained untarnished. The laboratory walls, once filled with the haunting presence of the dolls, now seemed to fade into the background, their eerie gaze a mere backdrop to the grim tableau of Izuku's endurance. The sound of his own heartbeat echoed in his ears, a steady rhythm that reminded him of his unyielding resilience. Frankly, that imbecile. The doctor said as she cleaned the wounds on the boy's face. Her usual sensual tone shifted to a tone of irritation. I told them to leave your pretty face alone. As Dr. Asmodeus continued tending to Izuku's wounds, her hands delicately approached his upper eyes, well aware of their sensitivity to light. The marks left by Beelzebub's teeth loomed dangerously close to his precious orbs, mere centimeters away, threatening irreparable damage. This knowledge seemed to stoke a deep anger within the doctor, her eyes flickering with a fiery intensity. If that bastard ruins your eyes. She seethed, her voice dripping with anger. I will turn him into my next doll. How dare he ruin all my hard work? What did you even do for them to send you to Beelzebub again? Izuku responded detachedly, his voice carrying the weight of resignation. I tried to escape again. He admitted. I got pretty far. Even found a hero, Death Arms, I think was his name. But he was nothing but a coward. As soon as he saw the brand, he gave me back to Mammon without a second thought. He even got on his knees, begging for his life, swearing he didn't try to help me. No dignity at all. The doctor hummed, a mix of amusement and contempt playing across her features. Mammon must have been furious. She mused. That greedy bastard hates when his possessions attempt to escape. But Beelzebub, that cannibalistic fiend, went too far this time. Fortunately, my quirk can rectify the situation. She said, her lips curling into a sinister grin. I never explained it to you, did I? Izuku shook his head, his gaze fixated on the doctor's face, anticipation mingled with trepidation. I call it Cinderella. She declared, her voice laced with a perverse pride. It allows me to return things and people to a beautiful state. Unfortunately, I can't use it on myself. With that, she pressed her hand against Izuku's face, her touch transmitting an eerie energy. It'll hurt a little, but you can handle it. In an instant, Izuku was plunged back into the depths of agony as the memories of Beelzebub's torture resurfaced with a vengeance. The pain was unbearable, tearing through his body once more, and he couldn't contain his screams of anguish. But within that agonizing ordeal, he clung to the belief that he could endure. He had faced worse before. When the doctor finally released her grip, the wounds on Izuku's face had all vanished without a trace, leaving behind smooth, unblemished skin. However, the wounds on his body remained, etching deep scars as a cruel reminder of the torment he had endured. Noticing Izuku's confusion, the doctor's smile widened, a perverse sense of satisfaction radiating from her. These scars are a lovely ornament to your body. She explained, her voice dripping with macabre affection, but they ruin your pretty face. As I said, I can restore your beauty, my definition of beauty. A mix of revulsion and helplessness welled up within Izuku, but he knew better than to challenge the doctor's whims. His face may be healed, but his body will forever bear all the scars caused by the villains. A twisted canvas reflecting the sick definition of beauty of this crazed doctor. Izuku stands at the top of the rooftop, the night breeze gently tousling his hair as he awaits President Mick's arrival. The city skyline twinkles below, a silent witness to the secrets and dangers concealed within its streets. President Mick soon appears, wearing his usual vibrant attire that somehow manages to shine even in the dim light. And even more surprising is the fact that the man can be great at stealth while wearing this. "Hey there, little listener." Mick greets with his trademark enthusiasm, waving his hand in a wide arc. As usual, he gives Izuku a lunchbox. Izuku's eyes light up at the sight of the lunchbox, knowing that it's become somewhat of a tradition for President Mick to bring him a meal during their rooftop rendezvous. Grateful for the gesture, he opens the lunchbox and takes a seat, savoring the delectable aroma that wafts from within. Thanks, Mick-san." Izuku says with genuine appreciation, his voice muffled between bites. Mick chuckles, his vibrant personality shining through. "Glad you like it, little listener," he remarks before donning a serious expression. "So, what's been on your mind? You seem worried." Izuku swallows his food before responding, his expression turning serious. "Yeah, there's something going on. I've been noticing more and more reports about a new drug circulating on the streets. Drug deals are increasing a lot as well. The dealers are even getting bold enough to do it in my territory," he explains with a frown. Everyone knows how protective Spider-Brad is of his territory, and one of the things he hates the most is drug dealers. The number of dealers he sent to the hospital is a testament to that. "I heard about it too," Mick replies. "And it's not only here. This new drug is popping off everywhere. Eraserhead came across it a few times, but he doesn't know yet what it does." As Izuku finishes his meal, he carefully passes back the lunchbox to Mick, giving the man one of his rare smiles. Then he gets up and strides towards the edge of the roof, his spider legs digging into the roof to support his perch. With a graceful yet sturdy posture, Izuku positions himself at the corner of the rooftop, his upper eyes scanning the streets with surgical precision. "I haven't spotted anyone carrying the new drug yet," Izuku remarks with a slight frown, his mind already calculating the possible implications. "But we should tread carefully, Mick-san." President Mick nods in agreement, his vibrant smile softened by the seriousness of the situation. "Absolutely, little listener," he replies, the enthusiasm in his voice taking a more measured tone. "I think it's best if we stick together. Two sets of eyes are better than one, especially when dealing with something like this." Izuku's eyes widen slightly at the suggestion, realizing the wisdom in having a partner by his side during the investigation. "Don't you mean 3 sets of eyes?" he says with a smirk, blinking his upper eyes at the man. "Of course." Mick laughs. 3 pairs of eyes are better than 2. He corrects. "You're right." Izuku nods. "How about we?" Before he can finish his sentence, a flicker of movement catches Izuku's attention. His eyes shift swiftly to the source, spotting a suspicious group making their way into an empty alley, a notorious location for drug deals. His heart quickens, and he glances at Mick, sharing an unspoken understanding. "I'll stick to the walls and try to gather intel," Izuku proposes, his voice low but resolute. "Can you go down and corner them? Once you're in position, we'll strike together." Mick grins, acknowledging Izuku's plan with a nod. "Sounds like a solid strategy, Spider-Brad," he replies, the use of Izuku's vigilante name emphasizing the trust he places in the young vigilante. "I'll be right behind you. Just remember to be cautious." With a last reassuring nod, Izuku braces his legs, using them like springs to propel himself towards the alley. His limbs cling effortlessly to the rough surface of the building as he descends soundlessly, a silent observer blending into the shadows. Izuku listens intently to what they are talking about. But he is rather displeased with what he hears. Those idiots are just some minor dealers. They have no idea about who makes the drug or even what it really is. They just know it's some kind of quirk-enhancing drug based on trigger. For a moment, Izuku hears a very familiar female voice in his head, but he immediately shakes it off. Now is not the time for flashbacks. From the corner of his eyes, he sees President Mick positioned. He smiles at the hero, despite knowing he can't see him, and lets himself fall down in the middle of the criminals. "I won't tolerate drugs in my territory," he announces as his legs start moving. Like whips, they hit the criminals quickly and painfully. President Mick quickly joins the fight, not even bothering to use his voice to attack. The two fight together with practiced ease they learned after weeks of working together. Their moves are almost like a dance. Mick's attacks are fast and precise. Izuku's are heavy and brutal. By the end of the fight, all criminals are either on the floor, passed out, or groaning in pain. And Izuku has a briefcase in his hands. One he's sure it's filled with drugs. Izuku's heart is still racing as the adrenaline of the fight starts fading. The vigilante looks towards President Mick, who's in the midst of tying the criminal's hands with a bunch of zip ties. The hero nods in acknowledgement at Izuku, the message clear to the boy. Gathering his resolve, Izuku carefully props the drug briefcase on the floor before him and unclasps the lid, taking a peek into its contents. But as his eyes lay on the syringes inside the case, filled with a painfully familiar electric blue liquid, Izuku feels like the entire world is crashing down around him. A shiver runs down his spine, and he starts sweating cold. The realization strikes him with an overwhelming force, and his breath catches in his throat. This is a drug he hoped he would never have to see again. Trigger G. No, Izuku whispers. No. He repeats, a little louder. No, he screams. In the dimly lit alley, Hisashi restrains the last of the criminals, their struggles gradually subsiding as he secures the bindings. But his attention is abruptly drawn away by a piercing scream, the desperate cry of the little listener echoing through the air. He spins around, expecting to find the boy under attack, but instead, he finds himself facing a much more heartbreaking scene. Kneeling on the ground is the boy's trembling frame in front of the open briefcase, its contents triggering a wave of terror within him. The little listener is hunched over, fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turn white from the sheer force of his grip. The words "no, please. No." Spill from his trembling lips, repeated like a desperate mantra, each utterance laden with fear and despair. Hisashi wants to help him. Not only is he a hero, but in the weeks he came to know Spider-Brat, he has come to care for the little listener like he was his own kid. Every sob that rips from his throat sounds so incredibly wrong in Hisashi's ears. Hisashi is well aware of the little listener's emotional nature. The hero has witnessed the boy shed tears over the smallest acts of kindness, even something as trivial as a lunchbox. And it's exactly because he has seen his tears that he knows those are different. The silent tears the boy shed while eating that bowl of soup on the first day they met are nothing like the anguished sobs raking the boy's frame. The boy's spider legs are completely restless on his back, almost forming a barrier around the boy and lashing at anything that moves. Hisashi knows he can't get any closer. Otherwise, he will end up being cut in half, like the fly that obliviously wandered within range of his limbs and was struck with deadly accuracy. Approaching isn't an option. Besides, he's sure that touching the kid at the moment would be a bad idea. He might not know where the boy is at the moment, but he's sure he's not here at all. Fortunately, Hisashi has other ways of helping. One thing people seem to forget is that his quirk is voice, not shout. He can use it for much more than just screaming at bad guys. Taking a deep breath, he begins to hum a calm and soothing melody, infusing his voice with the resonance of his quirk. The melodic vibrations permeate the alley, enveloping the space in a comforting aura, drowning out all other sounds. Even the sobs of the little listener, though still visible in their trembling form, seem to fade into the background as Hisashi persists. Driven by his stubborn determination, Hisashi continues to hum for several minutes, unwavering in his commitment to calm the distraught boy. With each passing moment, he observes the transformation taking place. The sobs gradually diminish, the trembling subsides, and the boy's white-knuckled grip on the floor loosens. Slowly, the little listener lifts his tear-streaked face. Hisashi's heart aches at the sight before him. The boy's face shows clearly how distraught he is by whatever he saw. Tear-stained cheeks, red and puffy lower eyes from incessant crying, and labored breaths akin to a runner after a marathon. But at least he seems to have calmed down. The spider legs stop lashing and fold back in his back. Giving the boy a few more moments to regain his composure, Hisashi cautiously approaches. His presence is gentle, mindful of the fragile state the boy finds himself in. Kneeling down in front of him, Hisashi extends his arms towards him, stopping just a few inches from the boy's arm. His eyes meet the little listener's, waiting patiently for any sign of consent or denial, very aware of the delicate state the little listener is still in. "Are you okay, little listener?" Hisashi's voice is soft, filled with genuine concern, and still a hint of his quirk. His words hang in the air, a lifeline offered, but with the understanding that the boy may need time and space before reaching out for it. "What do you need? Touch, proximity, or space?" "Space, please." The boy says hesitantly, still trembling while he shakes his head. Hisashi gives him a slow nod and, respecting the boy's boundaries, lowers his hand and takes a step back, mindful of his posture to avoid any sense of towering over him. The air between them is filled with a quiet understanding as they maintain their respective positions, allowing the boy the necessary time and space to regain his composure. Minutes pass in gentle silence, punctuated only by the soft sounds of the alley. The boy gradually calms down, his trembling subsiding as he bravely recomposes his demeanor. Then, with a final calming breath, he reaches for the briefcase and closes it. Then he slides it towards Hisashi, still avoiding looking at it. With a nod of understanding, Hisashi turns his back to the boy, ensuring that he won't catch another glimpse of the distressing contents of the briefcase. Hisashi looks in confusion at the many syringes inside, filled with an electric blue liquid he can't identify. Trigger G. The boy states, seemingly sensing Hisashi's confusion, his voice calm and detached, though a subtle undercurrent of fear tinges on his words. Unlike regular trigger, this variation can permanently enhance a quirk as long as you are compatible. However, the compatibility rate is less than 10%. And even if you are compatible, you will feel like molten lava is coursing through your veins. The use may lead to permanent mutations in both your quirk and body. As the little listener calmly explains the nature of the drug, Hisashi's experience as a hero allows him to read between the lines. The low compatibility rate, the excruciating sensation of molten lava coursing through one's veins, and the potential for permanent mutations in both body and quirk. These aren't merely hypotheticals or hearsay. The little listener is speaking from first-hand experience. And Hisashi is pretty sure the boy didn't have a choice in the matter. Suddenly, the panic attack makes a lot more sense. The weight of the circumstances becomes more apparent and Hisashi's heart goes out to the boy, knowing that he has endured far more than anyone his age should have. Hisashi can't help but admire how strong he is to still be there even after everything he faced. As Hisashi opens his mouth to say something, the piercing sound of a siren cuts through the air, signaling the imminent arrival of the police. Worry etches across his features as he glances towards the little listener. Spider Brad is still a vigilante, so the police will try to arrest him if they see him. "Oh, I'll be fine." The boy reassures Hisashi, his words laced with a resolute determination. Without hesitation, he leaps onto the nearest wall, effortlessly scaling it with agility and disappearing into the night. As Hisashi waits for the police to take custody of the restrained criminals, his gaze drifts back to the closed briefcase. A sense of foreboding settles within him. Some would call it paranoia. He calls it intuition. And his intuition says that this particular case will prove to be more intricate and multifaceted than he could have anticipated. Not even 2 years of constant torture had been enough to desensitize Izuku to the horrors of Dr. Asmodeus's experiments. Each session seemed to inflict even greater agony than the last, a relentless cycle of pain and suffering. Once again, Izuku found himself in the familiar confines of the laboratory, surrounded by sterile white walls and shelves lined with haunting dolls. Bound to the hospital bed, his body strained against the restraints, multiple needles puncturing his arms and legs, delivering concentrated doses of Trigger G and Quicksilver into his veins. The pain pulsed through him, an unrelenting torment that seemed to consume every fiber of his being. Dr. Asmodeus stood nearby, her gaze fixed on the monitors displaying Izuku's vital signs. She jotted down notes on a clipboard, her mind consumed by thoughts of experimentation. The silence hung heavily in the room, broken only by the hum of machinery and the sporadic scribbling of the doctor's pen. Izuku remained quiet, not from a lack of pain, but because his voice had been drained by countless screams. How long had he been here? Seconds? Minutes? Hours? It was impossible to tell, as the laboratory offered no indication of the passage of time. The room was completely stripped of clocks or windows. Suddenly, the laboratory door swung open and Lilith entered the room. Her presence brought a brief flicker of recognition in Izuku's weary eyes, but he lacked the strength to meet her gaze fully. "How's it going?" Lilith inquired, her tone devoid of warmth. "It's been a while since he showed any progress. We are close to a breakthrough. I can feel it." Asmodeus replied, her voice carrying a mix of determination and excitement. "Maybe if I try using this instead of that. Or perhaps." Izuku struggled to comprehend the barrage of scientific jargon that spilled from her lips. He was no scientist and in his current state, his mind could only register the overwhelming waves of pain. "Well, if he doesn't show results soon, we'll have to dispose of him." Lilith responded coldly, her words sending a jolt of panic through Izuku's weary frame. "We can't continue to waste resources on someone who has reached their limit." Her eyes scanned the laboratory until they landed on a small bottle. "What's that?" Izuku's mind briefly grasped the gravity of Lilith's words, fear coursing through him at the threat of being discarded like a worthless object. However, the pain that consumed him overshadowed his ability to process the situation fully. His focus remained fixated on enduring the torment inflicted upon him, his thoughts fragmented and his body weak. "Oh? That?" Asmodeus responded, a sadistic glimmer in her eyes. "It's just something I concocted a few days ago. A mixture of Belial's venom and that of a stonefish. The result is a poison that is less lethal but inflicts a far greater amount of pain." Lilith's eyes sparkled with a twisted fascination. "Interesting. And is Belial immune to it?" she inquired, a chilling implication lingering in her question. Izuku felt a spike of fear ripple through him, his heart racing at the horrifying possibilities. "Resistant, but not immune," Asmodeus answered, her tone laced with dark delight. "He won't die." Her grin widened a sinister expression that sent shivers down Izuku's spine. "But he'll wish he could." A sadistic grin spread across Lilith's face as she reveled in the prospect of inflicting more torment upon the young boy. "Alright, inject him with it." she commanded, her voice dripping with sadistic anticipation. Perhaps a little more pain is exactly what's been missing. Understood, boss. Asmodeus acknowledged with a nod, her compliance unwavering. Retrieving a syringe from a nearby drawer, she swiftly filled it with the venomous concoction. In one swift motion, she jabbed the syringe into Izuku's trembling thigh, delivering the poison deep into his already battered body. The act was carried out with a cold efficiency, an embodiment of the doctor's twisted expertise. A few seconds after the venomous mixture was applied, Izuku's body reacted with a sudden cold sweat and a sharp throbbing pain originating from the injection site. The intense discomfort quickly spread throughout his body, causing dizziness and making it difficult to breathe. Overwhelmed by the agonizing pain, Izuku couldn't help but unleash a torrent of screams, his sore throat stretching as he tried to give voice to the indescribable sensations coursing through him. The pain was something he couldn't put into words. In the midst of his suffering, a peculiar sensation washed over Izuku as if he was melting. His sweat took on an unusual appearance, thickening and altering in texture. Lilith's inquisitive voice pierced through the symphony of anguish. "What's that white stuff?" Lilith queried, noticing the abnormality. "It doesn't look like sweat." Asmodeus, equally intrigued, examined the substance on Izuku's forehead and offered an explanation after some time had passed. "Oh, it's collagen." Asmodeus shared with an excited tone. "It appears that his bones are undergoing some sort of transformation. This could mean we're finally making progress." As sweat dripped from Izuku's body, he felt a peculiar sensation building beneath his skin. It was as if a weight was settling within him, causing his body to grow heavy. A profound transformation seemed to unfold as if every bone in his body was melting away, only to be remade anew. A stinging sensation concentrated on the side of his spine, just beneath his shoulder blades, intensifying over time. The sensation resembled dozens of stings coming from under his skin, like something was desperately clawing from within to break free. Izuku's cries of pain escalated alongside the growing sensation until he heard a distinct sound of tearing, followed by a warm rush against his back. The bed beneath him gave way, causing Izuku to fall to the floor. However, he found himself partially supported by an unseen force against his back. The pain overwhelmed him, forcing his eyes shut, preventing him from witnessing the unfolding events. "Well, this isn't what I was expecting," Lilith remarked, her voice tinged with surprise. "Do you think he'll be able to control it?" "Not yet, but with proper training, I believe he can," Asmodeus responded. "This finally explains the connection between his multiple eyes and the venomous fangs. The boy possesses traits akin to a spider." Asmodeus and Lilith continued their hushed conversation while Izuku, overwhelmed by the pain, succumbed to unconsciousness. The world around him faded into darkness, leaving him devoid of sensation or sound. Eventually, Izuku regained consciousness, finding himself back in the familiarity of his room, though the duration of his unconsciousness remained a mystery. Attempting to rise, he discovered that his body felt unnaturally heavy, as if weighed down by an immense burden. Every movement required tremendous effort as if he were encased in lead. With great difficulty, he managed to lift his head and noticed the presence of a note nearby, a common occurrence in his life. Using his heavy arm, Izuku strained to bring the note closer, his curiosity piqued by its contents. "Hello Belial. Our last experiment proved to be a complete success. I'm sure you must be curious about what transpired. It's quite simple. Your quirk has finally reached the state I refer to as awakened. Your bones have undergone a remarkable transformation, adapting to the mercury injected into your system. They have now become composed of the very substance itself, much like your newly formed limbs. Through the adaptations you acquired during the experiments, your bones remain in a state of simultaneous solidity and liquidity, granting them unparalleled flexibility. The current sensation of heaviness you experience is to be expected. Mercury is approximately 10 times denser than bone, resulting in a significant increase in your weight. However, with the proper training, this can be overcome. Mammon will assist you with that. The experiments will persist as I require further samples of your blood to perfect the Trigger G formula. But I would like to extend my congratulations, my dear. You are my greatest accomplishment to date. I anticipate our next encounter. Asmodeus." Izuku's eyes scanned the note, his brow furrowing in confusion. New limbs. He attempted to scratch his head despite the heaviness that weighed down his limbs, and to his astonishment, he felt the scratching sensation. Perplexed, he glanced down, only to discover his heavy arm hanging limply by his side. Whatever had just scratched his head, it certainly wasn't his own arm. Curiosity mingled with trepidation as Izuku raised his gaze, and his eyes fell upon a metallic-like limb positioned just above his head. The limb resembled a spider leg, boasting 7 distinct joints and composed entirely of a shimmering silvery metal. It was a material he had become intimately acquainted with through his experiments, although now it remained solid, unlike the liquid form he had previously encountered. To his surprise, he discovered 7 more of these spider-like limbs firmly affixed to his back. Understanding dawned upon him, realization flooding his thoughts. The Trigger G had catalyzed a profound evolution in his quirk. It seemed that his destiny had always been intertwined with that of a spider. Fascinated, he observed as one of the metallic limbs shifted and moved, its control proving challenging yet not insurmountable. A mix of awe and determination welled within him, for he knew that with time and practice, he could learn to master this newfound aspect of his quirk. Yet, beneath the awe, a bitter laugh escaped Izuku's sore throat. With each passing day, these villains transformed him further into a creature resembling a monster. Izuku watches the docks from his perched position atop the building. He's managed to wrangle a hem, persuade information from a dealer that 2 of the people responsible for the Trigger G trade will show up here tonight to discuss something. Apparently, 2 gang leaders are coming here tonight to have a discussion about territorial disputes. Both gangs are dealing with Trigger G. Well, Izuku doesn't care who they are, as long as they have some information about who's making the drug or know someone who does. The only thing in his mind is getting this damn drug out of the streets. He won't allow anyone to suffer like he did because of this drug. Not far from Izuku's perched position, Present Mick remains concealed in a strategic hiding spot, his senses attuned to the unfolding events at the docks. From his covert vantage point, he patiently awaits the arrival of the 2 notorious gang leaders, knowing that their encounter could provide crucial leads and valuable insights into the enigmatic drug's origins. Izuku's senses sharpen as he observes the scene below, relaying crucial details to Mick through the communication device the hero gave him earlier. Their shared objective outweighs any reservations he may have about heroes for the time being. "I'm seeing something," Izuku says, activating the comm device Mick gave him earlier. "I think it's them. Both are accompanied. I see at least 8 people apart from the leaders. 4 are armed with some kind of firearm. 2 have clubs. The other 2 have some kind of mutation quirk. I see claws. They look pretty sharp." "Understood, Spider Brat," Mick replies. "What about the leaders?" he asks, relying on Izuku's night vision for scouting. "No clear mutation. The first one is wearing white pants and jacket. Sunglasses even though it's night, maybe his quirk is vision related. He has his hands in his pockets and seems to be fiddling with something. Maybe a knife." Izuku relays. "The second one is wearing jeans and a black vest. Relaxed posture. No sign of mutation either, but the way he moves his hands indicates a contact quirk. He looks prepared to grab something at any moment." "Alright." Present Mick nods. "Focus on the armed ones first. We jump in at 10. You count." "Understood." Izuku nods and pulls his face mask up. 1, 2, 3 Izuku mutters, feeling the adrenaline coursing through his veins. His face mask is pulled up, concealing his identity and allowing him to fully immerse himself in his vigilante persona. 4, 5, 6 The legs tense on the floor. 7, 8, 9 He can see Present Mick start moving from the corner of his eyes. 10. Izuku propels himself into the air, his agile form soaring towards the center of the group. "Stop right there, criminal scum." Present Mick screams while Izuku is still out of range. The attack takes the criminals by surprise and stuns a few of them. With precision and calculated force, Izuku aims to land directly on top of the first armed thug, utilizing his considerable weight to incapacitate the individual. His heavy weight due to his mercury bones allows him to quickly knock the man out. But the swift roundhouse kick aimed at the criminal near him, Izuku delivers a powerful blow to the back of the thug's head. Simultaneously, his spider legs lash out, knocking away the club of one criminal and intercepting the claw attack of another. Meanwhile, Present Mick deftly retrieves a hidden knife from his boot and engages with precision and speed. Disarming one criminal, he swiftly throws the individual over his shoulder, the blade piercing the criminal's thigh. Izuku wastes no time as he launches himself at the black-vested leader, delivering a powerful dropkick to the man's face before gracefully maneuvering himself back into a standing position using his spider legs. One of his legs strikes with precision, impaling the hand of the criminal attempting to aim a gun at him. The combined efforts of Izuku and Mick quickly neutralize the armed threats, leaving only the 2 mutants, the one with the club and the white-clad leader. While Izuku deals with the mutants, Present Mick engages in a tense battle with the white-clad leader, who pulls a butterfly knife from his pocket. The clash of their movements fills the air as Mick skillfully counters the leader's attacks, showcasing his own formidable combat prowess. Izuku keeps the mutant criminals at bay with his agile spider legs, utilizing quick slashes whenever an opening presents itself. "Behind you, Spider." Present Mick alerts Izuku. Izuku turns around and finds himself facing a looming threat from behind. The last villain, muscles bulging with strength, swings a club at Izuku's head with tremendous force. Despite his best efforts, Izuku is unable to dodge the attack in time and the impact lands squarely on his face. Surprisingly, the club shatters upon contact, barely affecting Izuku. Reacting swiftly, Izuku retaliates with a powerful punch to the man's stomach, sending him flying several meters and rendering him unconscious. Turning his attention back to the mutant criminals, Izuku seizes the opportunity to immobilize them with a swift strike from his spider legs, rendering them unconscious and effectively ending the threat. Turning back to present Mick, he sees the man executing a judo throw on the last criminal, followed by an axe kick to his head, effectively ending the fight. They exchange a brief concerned glance before present Mick rushes to Izuku's side, his worry evident in his voice. "Are you alright, little listener?" Mick asks, cautiously reaching out to examine Izuku's head where the club had struck. Aware of Izuku's aversion to physical contact, Mick hesitates, unsure if he should proceed. Izuku takes a deep breath and nods, understanding Mick's concern. He lowers his head, allowing Mick to get a closer look. Fortunately, there is only a small bump, a temporary mark that will fade away soon. Izuku simply shrugs at Mick's puzzled expression and then points a leg toward the two leaders. "We should tie them up," Izuku suggests. "You're right." Mick nods in agreement. "We can leave the interrogation to the police. I have a friend who can extract information from them." He pulls out his phone to call the police to get the criminals. Izuku starts searching the unconscious criminals, finding vials of Trigger G in their possession. But being prepared this time, he doesn't freak out. However, his attention is drawn to something unexpected: the gun of one of the thugs. Contrary to his initial assumption, it appears to be more than just a typical pistol. Those guns are actually meant to fire. "Little listener, behind you." Present Mick's warning comes just in time, alerting Izuku to the thug on the ground who aims his gun at him. Reacting swiftly, present Mick throws himself in front of Izuku, using his own body as a shield. The bullet strikes Mick's upper arm, and both fall to the floor. Izuku quickly recovers and pounces on the thug, forcefully smashing their head against the ground. "Mick-san, are you alright?" Izuku asks, concern evident in his voice as he examines the wound. However, his eyes widen when he notices a syringe protruding from Mick's arm. "Damn it." Present Mick writhes in pain on the floor, screaming as his quirk goes haywire, releasing sound waves uncontrollably. Izuku braces himself, relying on his legs to steady himself as he cautiously approaches the hero, covering his ears to shield himself from the cacophony. Kneeling before present Mick, Izuku pulls him into a tight embrace, offering comfort and reassurance. "It's alright, Mick-san. Everything will be okay," he says in a soothing voice. "It hurts, but it's only temporary. You're going to be okay." As he holds Mick, Izuku notices a liquid dripping from the hero's ears, along with a small device. Recognizing the device as hearing aids, he quickly removes them. The fluid, a mixture of blood and an unfamiliar substance, raises his concern. Izuku understands the implications. Present Mick's ears are mutating because of the Trigger G, indicating compatibility with the drug. While lost in thought, Izuku's attention is drawn to present Mick's sudden change in demeanor. His eyes roll inward and he becomes limp in Izuku's arms. Panic grips Izuku's heart and he instinctively places two fingers on the hero's neck, searching for a pulse. "Please, no." Izuku whispers anxiously, his relief palpable when he detects a steady pulse. He just passed out. Izuku's worry remains, but he takes a moment to collect himself, grateful that Mick is unconscious rather than in a more critical condition. With determined resolve, he gently lays the hero on the ground, ensuring he's in a comfortable position. Still, what should he do now? Izuku assesses the situation, weighing his options carefully. He glances at the motionless criminals on the ground before turning his attention back to the unconscious hero. Leaving present Mick behind is not an option. If any of the criminals wakes up, they won't hesitate to kill the hero. However, taking him to the police is out of the question. They'll certainly think Izuku attacked him. With a resigned sigh, Izuku carefully lifts Mick and positions him on his shoulders. Despite the noticeable size difference between them, the hero is quite light. With a last glance at the criminals, Izuku starts walking away with the hero. He can freak out about what he's about to do later. Maybe Izuku was an idiot for doing this again. But once again, he found himself trying to escape the 9 circles of hell. In the last few months since his spider legs manifested, Mayman's training has become even more hellish. By now, he had become accustomed enough to his new weight that he could move relatively nimbly. His mercury bones were incredibly strong, and all the torture he had endured all this time had made his pain tolerance extremely high. The problem was just that he knew he was making progress quickly. Izuku never forgot what the 9 circles of hell wanted him to become. He was sure that soon, they would decide that Izuku was ready to become the assassin they wanted. This may be his last chance to escape. He sprints as fast as he can, but despite adapting to his new weight, he remains slower than he once was. For many times, he tripped and fell down due to overcompensating his balance because of the spider legs he could barely control. Mammon's relentless pursuit echoed behind him, his footsteps drawing nearer with every passing second. Izuku's heart raced with desperation, knowing his time was running out. Pushing his limits, he maneuvered through the labyrinthine hallways, the pressure of Mammon's presence urging him forward. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but Izuku's resolve burned fiercely. With each step, he clung to the hope that somehow, against all odds, he could break free from the clutches of the 9 circles of hell and forge a path to a life of his own choosing. As he ran, he ended up once more bumping into a hero in patrol. The hero wore a yellow and green costume, a yellow mask over his eyes, and padlock earrings. Izuku wasn't sure who this hero was, and he considered running away before the hero could ask anything. He still remembered the last 2 heroes who he talked to. But as he heard Maymon's footsteps drawing closer, he knew he had no choice but to take a leap of faith. "Please, help me," he begged the hero. "Hey, kid. It's okay." The hero reached to take Izuku's hand. "I'll help." Why? He suddenly froze when he saw the brand on Izuku's hand. "Oh, there you are." Maymon suddenly appeared with a sickly sweet smile on his face. "Sorry about that. My kid likes to run ahead. He's a little troublemaker." Izuku could see in the hero's expression that he didn't believe Maymon, but he stayed silent for several seconds. It's no problem, mister," the hero replied. "Come on, let's go back," Maymon called, and Izuku tried to hold onto the hero's hand, begging with his eyes to be saved. "I can't save you, kid," the hero said, nudging him towards Maymon while avoiding looking Izuku in the eyes. "Go back with him." Izuku felt something shattering inside him with that. Why did no hero ever try to help him? Is he really undeserving of being saved? Shouldn't the hero save anyone? Suddenly, Maymon grabbed his hand and pulled him away from the hero. "Just keep your mouth shut and we'll have no problem," Maymon said, and the hero just nodded at him. Izuku is so shocked that he only walks with him in complete silence. Surprisingly, this time, Maymon doesn't mock him. He doesn't scold him for escaping. Doesn't say he'll send him to Beelzebub. They just walked in silence until they got back to the facility and Maymon pushed Izuku back into his room. "You finally get it, don't you?" Maymon said, looking down at Izuku. "The heroes won't save me," Izuku responded, his gaze meeting Maymon's. "Isn't that right?" "Yes, Belial. No hero will ever save you." Maymon nodded. "You belong to us. It's time you stop this useless rebellion. We don't like hurting you, you know. When we do, we have to spend resources to heal you. It's a hassle. Just behave from now on, and you might even get some privileges with time." Before Izuku could respond, Maymon departed, leaving him alone with his thoughts. The weight of resignation settled upon him, along with the realization that escape was not a feasible option. He found himself caught between the tormentors who control his fate and a world that seemed indifferent to his suffering. Izuku's gaze fixated on his left hand, particularly on the branded mark that had served as a constant reminder of his enslavement. A whirlwind of emotion surged through him, ranging from pain and fear to sorrow and desperation. But amidst this turbulent storm of feelings, one emotion rose to the forefront: anger. Fury coursed through his veins, ignited by the memories of his parents' betrayal, the relentless cruelty of the villains who have tortured him, and the cold indifference of the heroes who have turned a blind eye to his suffering. Above all, his anger was directed at the accursed brand that brands him as property, robbing him of agency and hope. In a fit of rage, Izuku could no longer bear the weight of his torment. With a primal scream, he drove one of his spider legs down onto the branded mark, piercing the back of his hand. Blood trickled from the wound, mingling with the mark, but it wasn't enough to rid himself of its oppressive presence. Driven by sheer frustration, he stabbed again and again, the pain in his hand becoming secondary to the overwhelming need to erase the brand that haunted him. Each strike was a desperate act of defiance, a desperate attempt to reclaim a semblance of control over his own fate. The room echoed with his cries and the rhythmic thud of his relentless assault. The anger fueled his actions, the adrenaline drowning out any sense of reason. With every blow, he longed to obliterate the symbol that had come to define his suffering. As his ashes eyes flutter open, he's immediately greeted by searing pain in his head. He winces, trying to recall what happened and how he ended up in this unfamiliar place. As he looks around, he realizes that he's lying on a bed inside a bare room. The old walls are littered with holes. He gently touches his head and finds it wrapped in bandages, covering his ears. Despite the bandages and the absence of his hearing aids, he doesn't have any problem hearing. Outside, he can hear the birds chirping and rain falling, something that is usually hard for him, even when he is wearing hearing aids. Memories of the recent events start to piece together in his mind. He recalls the fight he and Spider-Brat had against a group of drug dealers. He remembers taking a bullet to protect the kid. His memory blurs as he recalls losing control of his quirk and eventually passing out from the pain. This explains why, besides the headaches, his throat feels so raw. The pain in his head intensifies as if to mirror the disarray of the room surrounding him. Questions fill his mind. What was the bullet that hit him? Where is he now? His thoughts then turn to Spider Brat. Where is the young vigilante? Did he manage to escape? Where is he now? Hisashi can't help but be worried about the little listener. Gathering his strength, Hisashi attempts to sit up, wincing again as his head throbs with pain. As Hisashi surveys his surroundings, he spots something lying on the bed beside him, a plushie, a spider plushie to be precise. It's the same plushie he had gifted to Spider Brat long ago. A warmth fills his heart at the thought of the young vigilante having held onto the small gift from Hisashi. Suddenly, a realization strikes him like a bolt of lightning. Is this where the kid lives? The pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place. The holes in the walls, the presence of the spider plushie, and the apparent absence of adults in the room all led to the same conclusion. It dawns on Hisashi that he is in Spider Brat's living space. This must be the kid's hideout, the place he calls home. His concern for the young vigilante amplifies. This place looks about to fall to the ground. Can anyone really live here? Where is Spider Brat now? As Hisashi stands by the bed, his attention is drawn to another sound emanating from the next room, the bathroom. He realizes that the sound he had initially mistaken for rain is actually running water. The water soon stops, and moments later, the door creaks open, revealing Spider Brat stepping out with a towel draped around his shoulders, busily drying his hair. Hisashi's eyes widen in shock as he sees the boy's state. Hisashi has never seen him wearing anything but hoodies and pants, so he never got to see much of his skin. But now, the kid is shirtless and wearing shorts, exposing a canvas of scars that mar his young body. The boy's arms and legs are littered with cut scars marring his skin. There is a patch of scar tissue on his upper body that appears to have been torn, and multiple bite marks mark his shoulders. The most striking and intricate patterns of scars are etched across his chest and belly, Lichtenberg figures. Someone tortured the kid using electricity, and the extent of the scars show that it happened for a long time. As the boy lowers the towel from his face, he freezes upon seeing Hisashi standing there. An awkward expression crosses his features, and he shakes his head, seemingly surprised by Hisashi's wakefulness. "Oh, didn't think you'd be awake yet." The boy mumbles, clearly caught off guard by Hisashi's presence. With an air of nonchalance, he grabs a shirt and attempts to put it on, but struggles slightly due to the presence of his spider legs. "Hey little listener." Hisashi greets with a friendly wave, doing his best to conceal the seething rage that churns inside him. He still remembers what happened the last time he showed anger in front of the little listener, and he certainly doesn't want a repeat of that. Instead, he tries to keep calm, especially considering he's in the boy's home. Once the boy finishes putting his shirt on, he turns to Hisashi with a worried expression. "How are you feeling?" he asks. "Honestly, my head is killing me," Hisashi replies. "And my hearing is weird. I mean, I should be practically deaf without my hearing aids." "The bullet that hit you," the little listener says. "It was trigger G. So, the pain that I felt. It's the result of the drug. Your auditory system has melted and remade itself," the little listener explains. "Which must be why your hearing is better now. The first time it happened to me, it remade my upper eyes. I can clearly hear the birds chirping outside," Hisashi says. "Normally, I wouldn't be able to do that even with my hearing aids on. This is permanent," the boy replies. "So, I think you should go after new hearing aids. Though, this time they should limit your hearing sense. My upper eyes have night vision 24/7, this is why I keep them shut when it's bright. I can't imagine what you've been through," Hisashi says sincerely. "I don't think I ever felt so much pain in my life, and I was injected with the drug only once, and I assume it was with a small dose." He looks sorrowfully at the little listener. "How long did you have to endure that?" As the silence lingers for several seconds, Hisashi thinks the boy will choose not to answer. Hisashi understands that discussing such painful memories can be difficult. However, after a deep sigh, the little listener finally responds, his gaze distant and haunted. "About 3 years. At least once every month. Sometimes twice in a month if the doctor wanted to test something new," the kid reveals, his voice heavy. "The experiment's length would vary. But the shortest session I can remember was about 3 hours long." The revelation sends a shiver down Hisashi's spine, and he can't help but feel a mix of anger and sadness at the cruelty and inhumanity the little listener has endured. He wishes he could take away the pain and erase the scars on the boy's body and mind. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Hisashi says, his voice full of empathy. "Is it okay if I hug you?" The boy's stoic facade begins to crumble, revealing vulnerability underneath. What?" His voice trembles as he asks. Hisashi smiles softly, understanding the young vigilante's hesitation. "Is it okay if I give you a hug?" he repeats gently, extending an open hand toward the boy. Confusion and raw emotion swirl in the little listener's eyes. It's evident that he struggles to comprehend why anyone would show him kindness after all he has endured. The weight of his past pain and betrayals must make it hard for him to accept the sincerity of his Ashi's intentions. Why? He asks, and his Ashi notices the tears welling up, threatening to spill over. What kind of game are you playing here? His Ashi's heart breaks at the boy's response, realizing the extent of the trust issues and fear that have been ingrained in him. He stays still with his arms open in invitation, but without any sudden movement. I'm not playing any games. His Ashi says gently, his voice sincere and earnest. And then no one he ever gave a shit BB before. The kid stutters. His Ashi's heart breaks even more at this revelation. He wishes he could turn back time and change the past to ensure that the young boy never had to suffer in silence. I shouldn't have been the first one to care. His Ashi laments. No one should have to endure what you've been through. He takes a gentle step forward, closing the distance between them but still giving the boy space and autonomy. His arms remain open, ready to offer comfort if the little listener chooses to accept it. The kid hesitates for a moment longer before stepping forward and accepting the hug. He stiffly wraps his arms around his Ashi's torso, his guard slowly starting to lower as he allows himself to be embraced. After a few seconds, the young vigilante begins to relax, finding solace in the comfort of the hug. His Ashi can feel a wet spot forming on his shirt as the boy cries silently, finally letting out the emotions that he had kept bottled up for so long. "Vixen." The boy calls, his voice trembling. The villains. The experiments. The torture. He gives a silent sob. Did I deserve it? His Ashi's heart clenches at the pain and self-doubt in the little listener's words. He tightens his embrace, wanting to provide as much comfort as he can. No, of course not, little listener. His Ashi assures him firmly. You did not deserve any of that. Nobody should have to endure such cruelty, least of all a little child. The boy hesitates before asking the question that has surely haunted him for so long. Then why has no one ever helped me? He buries his face on his Ashi's shirt. Why didn't anyone save me? His Ashi's heart aches at the desperation and pain in the kid's voice. He holds the boy close, offering what comfort he can, but he knows he has no easy answers to give. I wish I could explain it. His Ashi says, his voice filled with sorrow and frustration. I could make 1,000 excuses, but the truth is that we failed you. Adults, heroes, society, we all failed you. I'm sorry, little listener. Stop, the kid says, shaking his head. I know you said words are worthless. His Ashi replies. And I understand why you think that. I wish I could do more. I wish I could take away all the pain you've endured. But all I can offer you now is my support and my presence. The boy stays silent for a few seconds, and his Ashi holds him gently, giving him the space he needs to process his emotions. It's more than anyone else ever offered me. The little listener finally says. I don't think I've ever been hugged in my life. Odd, will this boy ever stop shredding his Ashi's heart? He has never been hugged before. Not once in his life. His Ashi tightens his embrace, wanting to convey as much reassurance and care as he can through the gesture. How does it feel? His Ashi asks gently, wanting to understand the impact of this moment on the boy. It feels nice. The little listener replies, his voice tinged with vulnerability. It's warm. I never thought I'd feel something like this. I can see why people like it so much. His Ashi smiles gently, knowing that this small gesture may be the beginning of building trust and healing for the young vigilante. I'm glad. His Ashi says, his voice gentle. You deserve to feel nice and loved, little listener. You deserve to have someone who cares for you. The boy clings to his Ashi a little tighter as if seeking reassurance that this moment of comfort is real and won't be taken away. I'll be here for you. His Ashi assures him. You're not alone anymore. I promise to be someone you can rely on, someone who will protect you. The boy's hold on his Ashi tightens for a moment. He looks up at his Ashi's face, searching for something, and his Ashi meets his gaze with kindness and understanding. I can't believe you. Not yet, the boy says hesitantly. His Ashi meets the young boy's gaze with understanding and patience. He can see the wariness and doubt in the boy's eyes, the hesitance to fully trust in the words being offered to him. He knows that trust is not something that can be easily given, especially after enduring so much pain and betrayal. I'll be patient. His Ashi says softly, his hand gently stroking the boy's back. I won't rush you. You can take all the time you need to trust me. And even if it's never. I'll be here, no matter what. The little listener's eyes show a mix of vulnerability and hope, and his Ashi feels he has taken a step in the right direction. It won't be easy, but his Ashi is stubborn. He'll be here for the little listener no matter what. After the last attempt to escape, Izuku's hope crumbled like fragile glass. The moment he woke up after his last breakdown with his hand healed and littered with new scars, but the brand still clear, he finally grasped the harsh reality. The heroes weren't coming to rescue him. Since that day, a profound change overcame him as if a part of his soul had withered away. That bright-eyed boy who had once dreamed of becoming a hero was dead. In his stead emerged an apathetic, hollow version of himself, drained of emotions driven solely by obedience. Mammon's brutal training intensified, each session pushing him to the brink. But Izuku's responses were starkly different. He would barely grunt in the face of all the torture he suffered, let alone cry like he used to. In the confines of the laboratory, Dr. Asmodeus's sick experiments pressed on. Yet, the agony that once engulfed him seemed dulled, his body almost numb to the torment. He had grown so detached and compliant that the doctor even took to foregoing the restraints. She still complained that he missed hearing his cries, but Izuku was too numb to care. Both Mammon and Lilith seemed content with this new compliant version of Izuku, or rather, Belial. One day, as Izuku indulged in the only pastime he had in this place, counting the cracks in the walls, now numbering 347, 2 more than last week, Mammon strode into his cell with a tray in hand. "I did mention that good behavior could fetch you a few privileges, didn't I?" Mammon remarked, depositing the tray on the floor with a casual kick, astonishingly keeping its contents intact. The tray held food, a pitiable assortment at that. Despite its unappetizing nature, it radiated warmth. Hospital food, it resembled. Stale bread, an overly ripe apple, porridge resembling vomit, bland fried chicken, unidentified grilled vegetables, and a cup of orange juice, the sole mildly pleasant offering. The food reheated in the microwave. Maybe they were simple leftovers. Nonetheless, Izuku devoured each morsel as if it were a gourmet feast. Starvation had clodded him for far too long. "Continue obeying, Belial," Mammon murmured as he watched Izuku eat. "And maybe next time, you'll get a say in your meal." Saying that, he leaves. Watching Mammon's departure, Izuku continued chewing on the stale bread. A dry, bitter chuckle escaped him. "How generous," he muttered, the sarcasm thick in his tone. He found himself obeying villains in the faint hope of one day securing a decent meal. Could he sink any lower than this? The notion of placing his hopes on such a meager promise felt like yet another cruel mockery in his life's grim narrative. It's with a heavy heart that his Ashi departs from the little listener's makeshift home. He knows it's necessary, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. In their last conversation, the little listener had started to open up to his Ashi, and despite having admitted he couldn't believe completely in his Ashi's kindness yet, he still allowed himself to be comforted by the voice hero. He put enough trust in his Ashi to show his vulnerable side, to show his tears. In the course of a single conversation, his Ashi had made more progress than in the several past months he worked with the young vigilante. He was determined never to betray the little listener's trust, to honor the fragile bond they were building. The kids seemed drained after their heart-to-heart. Pushing further or overstaying would only set them back. So, his Ashi made sure the kid was alright and, despite protests, left some money behind before leaving. Exiting the place, his Ashi couldn't help but frown as he spotted the abandoned building where the little listener resided. It was a condemned structure, part of a block that had been condemned following an earthquake. Many buildings had collapsed, but some remained almost intact. For safety reasons, the entire block had been scheduled for demolition, but several factors made it so the buildings were still standing even years later. Fortunately, the building appeared sturdy, which brought relief to some of his Ashi's concerns about the boy's current living situation. One day, he vowed, one day he would get the little listener into a proper home. One filled with all the love he deserved so much yet never got. Be it with himself or another family. However, this would only be possible once the kid placed enough trust in him. Patience was his ally. Until that day arrived, his Ashi resolved to keep a watchful eye on the young vigilante during his patrols. With this in mind, his Ashi made his way out of the condemned block, a destination set in his mind. He's sure his friends are worried about him after he seemingly vanished last night. As he left, he couldn't help but wince at how loud everything sounds. Going from practically deaf to having super hearing overnight is something that will take some getting used to. Reaching into his pocket, he takes out 2 cotton balls that little listener gave him before he left and stuffs them into his ears. He's still hearing too much, but at least it's bearable. Still, it's better for him to walk along less busy streets until he gets used to it or until he gets new hearing aids to limit his hearing, as the boy recommended. Namasa's attention has been tethered to his phone for hours, a sense of unease gnawing at him. The waiting feels interminable. The night before, he had rushed to the docks in response to a tip about a drug deal that his Ashi and Spider Brad had intercepted. His Ashi was usually there, waiting, no matter how chaotic the situation. But not this time. His Ashi was missing, no message left behind, leaving Namasa filled with dread. His Ashi was like a brother to Namasa's husband, and even though their own relationship wasn't as close, he counted his Ashi as one of his best friends. He knew his Ashi wouldn't vanish without a trace unless something dire had transpired. All he could do was hope and wait for news. In the midst of his vigil, Sansa bursts into his office, his cat eyes wide and anxious. "President Mick is here," he says in a rush. "He's here now." Masa sprang from his chair, propelled toward the door by a surge of concern. "He's in one of the interrogation rooms." Sansa quickly briefs him. "Ask for you and Eraserhead." "Why the interrogation room?" Masa raises an eyebrow. "I heard him saying something about needing silence." Sansa replies. "He was rubbing his temple a lot. I don't remember President Mick having migraines, but I'll get him some painkillers just in case." Masa says thoughtfully. "Did he seem hurt?" "No." Sansa shakes his head. "But he seemed very troubled." "Alright. Call Eraser, I'll check on him first." Masa says, rushing out. The corridors of the police station blur as Masa races to the interrogation room. He reaches the door, grasping the handle with urgency, and pulls it open. Inside, Hisashi is hunched over the cold metal table, his posture tense, his expression strained. His fingers are pressed against his temples, a sign of distress that sends another spike of worry through Masa. "Masa, I love you," Hisashi says in a voice barely above a whisper. "But please, close this door slowly and keep your voice down. My ears are killing me." Masa obeys immediately, easing the door shut, his movements careful and deliberate. He knows Hisashi well enough to understand the gravity of the situation. As he turns to face Hisashi, he takes in the absence of the familiar hearing aids and the cotton stuffed into his ears. 1,000 questions bubble up in his mind, but he reins them in, remembering Hisashi's request for patience and discretion. "Hisashi, what happened?" he asks, lowering his voice at Hisashi's request. Hisashi lets out a tired sigh and runs a hand through his hair. His classic spiked hair is messed up and barely standing. "Long story, and I don't want to explain more than once," he says, a hint of exhaustion in his eyes. "So let's wait for Shouta first." "I'm fine, don't worry, just not used to this yet." He points to his ears. "Alright." Masa nods. "Do you need something?" "A tea would be nice." Hisashi smiles. "But I know you don't have that here, so water will do." "Got it." Masa says. "I lock the door so no one bothers you. The room is soundproof." "I know, that's why I came here." Hisashi replies. Masa quickly returns with a cup of water and a couple of painkillers. He hands them over to Hisashi, who accepts them with a weary but grateful smile. The hero quickly downs the painkillers with the water, sighing in relief as he leans back in his chair. It's clear he's been through a lot. "We'll wait for Shouta to get here before we start," Masa says gently, keeping his voice low. "In the meantime, is there anything else you need?" Hisashi shakes his head, looking a little more at ease as the painkillers kick in. "Just some time to gather my thoughts," he replies, his fingers lightly tapping on the table. "And maybe some company if you don't mind." Masa nods in understanding, silently pulling a chair over the table and sitting down. As they sit in silence, waiting for Shouta to arrive, Masa can't help but think about the strong bond between his husband and Hisashi. They are brothers in everything but blood. And that deep bond is the exact reason why Masa isn't surprised when Shouta arrives less than 10 minutes later, despite them living at least 20 minutes from the precinct. Masa has no doubt that Shouta came here by rooftop jumping instead of walking like a normal person. As soon as Shouta enters the room, his eyes immediately zero in on Hisashi. Without a word, he goes over to his friend, his usual stoic expression showing a hint of concern. "How are you holding up, Hisashi?" Shouta asks, his voice gruff but filled with genuine worry. "I've felt better," Hisashi replies with a weak smile. "But I've also felt a lot worse. A good night of sleep and I'll be good as new." Shouta nods and sits down next to Hisashi, still far enough to give him personal space. "Alright." Masa breaks the silence after a few more seconds. "I guess we can start. A few things for the record," Hisashi says. "First, don't record this, Masa. The little listener will be mentioned a lot. Second, Spider Brad is fine. He's the one who saved me last night." "Alright. Why don't we start from the beginning?" Masa says. "We arrested all the criminals last night. It doesn't look like any of them managed to run away. We also got the drugs." Hisashi's grin returns briefly. "Yeah," he says proudly. "The little listener and I make a pretty good team. We took care of those clowns without much trouble." His expression then grows more somber. "But things took a turn when one of them pulled out a gun. The scumbag was about to shoot the little listener, so I took the bullet for him." "You took a bullet," Shouta exclaims, though still mindful of his volume. Hisashi raises his hands defensively. "I'm okay," he assures them. "But it wasn't just any bullet. This almost makes it worse." He winces as if recalling a painful memory. "What kind of bullet was it, Hisashi?" Shouta asks, his voice hesitant. "It was Trigger G." Hisashi sighs heavily. "The same drug we're trying to track down." It felt just like the little listener told me a few weeks ago. Like molten lava coursing through my veins. My quirk went haywire for a while. Eventually, I blacked out from the pain. When I woke up, I found myself in an unfamiliar bedroom, lying in a bed I didn't recognize. Wait, are you saying? Namasa's eyes widen in realization. Yep. The little listener saved me and took me to his home. Hisashi replies. He even patched me up. Then, he explained a little more about the effects of the drug. It's terrifying, to say the least. Terrifying how? Shouta asks, raising an eyebrow. It completely rewired my hearing system. Hisashi reveals, his voice laced with discomfort. Painful as hell. I'm almost glad I was unconscious for most of it. That's why I'm not wearing my hearing aids. I can hear again. Actually, I have super hearing now. Hisashi's revelation hangs in the room, each word heavier than the last. Namasa and Shouta exchange glances, their concern evident. This situation has taken a darker turn than they could have ever expected. So, you're saying that Trigger G completely remade your quirk and your hearing? Namasa asks, his voice filled with worry. Yeah, it's why I'm having such a migraine at the moment. It feels like everyone is shouting in my ear constantly. Hisashi sighs. Hisashi, you can't just ignore this. Shouta says firmly. You need to see a doctor. We can't risk your health. Don't worry, I'm going straight to Chiyo after we finish here. Hisashi waves him off. But not before I finish here. Alright. Namasa concedes. What else do you have? About the case. Nothing concrete. But about the little listener. A lot. Hisashi leans forward, his expression determined. I'm not going to betray his trust by revealing specifics. But let me tell you this, he has been through hell. He's been betrayed by everyone. Heroes, civilians, villains, even his own family. I don't care what the police or the HPSC says about him. We have to save him. Namasa sighs at that. It's just like Hisashi to act like this. But that's exactly why both he and Shouta know he's the best person to get Spider Brat's trust. And their best bet at getting that kid out of the streets. Alright, I'll help keep anything about the kid under wraps for now. But our priority remains finding the source of this drug. Namasa nods in understanding. Hisashi takes a moment to gather his thoughts before continuing. According to the little listener, the drug was initially created by a doctor affiliated with the 9 Circles of Hell. He explains. However, it's been 3 years since anyone has heard about them. I have my suspicions about what happened to them, but until the little listener confirms, it's just a theory. The point is, they're supposed to be all dead, so who could be producing the drug now? That's the million-dollar question. Namasa sighs. For now, go get checked to make sure there's nothing wrong with your body. I'll interrogate our new friends. How I wish I could be there. Hisashi replies with a lazy smile. Give them hell, Masa. You can count on me. Namasa replies with a sadistic grin. Maybe his husband rubbed on him. Well, I'll make sure you get to Chiyo. Shouta says, getting up before sending a glance at Namasa. You warn us if you get any lead. Understood. Namasa gives both a salute and watches as they leave the room. As they leave, Namasa takes a few minutes more to process everything he just learned. They aren't any closer to finding out who is supplying the drug, but Hisashi seems to have made a lot of progress with the young vigilante. That's great news. He really hopes that Hisashi can get through to the kid. From what he gathered, the kid never got love from anyone. It's admirable just how kind the kid still is, despite how much the world made him suffer. Namasa will be damned if he doesn't help the kid get the family he deserves. As the days passed, Izuku's life with the villains became increasingly routine, and he couldn't help but grow accustomed to his experiences. Mammon's relentless training and torture sessions, where pain had once been his constant companion, now felt more like a monotonous chore. Dr. Asmodeus continued her experiments, each session leaving Izuku's body scarred and battered. The emotional toll of his tormentor's cruelty had dulled. He hardly even flinched whenever Leviathan the shapeshifter would play his cruel pranks on him. The man liked to turn himself into a hero and barge into Izuku's room, pretending he was there to save him, only to go back to his real form, or maybe not. Izuku never really saw his real form and laugh at him for having hope. Even that failed to get a reaction from Izuku anymore. Nowadays, whenever the villain came around, Izuku would just wave and proceed to ignore him. Then, one day, Mammon appeared with a folded suit in hand, and Izuku knew that something was about to happen. Something he wouldn't like. Lilith believes you're ready. Mammon explained as he gave him the suit. It's time for your first mission. It's time for your first mission. Those words echoed in his mind as Izuku went through the motions of putting the suit on autopilot. Surprisingly, Mammon helped him put it on, kneeling down and tying the tie for him. The suit was even adapted to accommodate his spider legs. All other clothes Izuku owned, he had to make holes on them to pass his legs. The suit felt foreign against his skin, a stark contrast to the faded, worn clothes he had become so used to. The fabric clung tightly to his body, and it was surprisingly flexible and breathable. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, seeing not the hopeful boy who had once dreamed of becoming a hero, but a shell of a person shaped by his captors. With a heavy heart and a sense of resignation, he followed Mammon's lead, stepping out of his room. He knew whatever he was going to be forced to do would haunt him for the rest of his life, but there was nothing he could do about it. Mammon led Izuku through the dimly lit corridors of the villain's hideout, each step echoing with a sense of foreboding. They eventually arrived at a heavy, ornate door adorned with an intricate carving of the symbol of the 9 circles of hell. Mammon knocked on the door. The voice from within called out, "Enter." The door creaked open, revealing a room bathed in crimson light. Lilith sat behind a grand obsidian desk, her piercing eyes fixed on the newcomer. She exuded an aura of authority and power, and her gaze seemed to pierce through Izuku's very soul. Whatever she saw, Izuku both dreaded it and hoped she would like it. "Ah, Mammon." Lilith purred seductively. "You've brought our young Belial. Leave us." Mammon obeyed without a word, closing the door behind him and leaving Izuku alone with the fearsome villainess. Lilith gestured for him to approach, her long, blood-red nails gleaming in the eerie light. Izuku couldn't help but feel a shiver of apprehension as he approached the desk. He tried to keep himself as straight as possible, making sure to be respectful to her. He knew firsthand just how bad it was to anger Lilith, and he didn't want to ever feel that again. "Belial, it's so nice to see you." Lilith purred, her lips curling into a sinister smile. "You've come a long way since your recruitment. Mammon told me that you've been much more compliant lately. Are you done with your little rebellious phase?" Izuku swallowed hard. He knew he was being tested right now, and if he answered this wrong he didn't want to think about the consequences. "Why yes, Lady Lilith," he replied, his voice trembling slightly but maintaining a tone of utmost respect. "I'm sorry for causing so many problems. I won't be rebellious anymore." Lilith's smile widened, and her red lips seemed to glisten in the eerie light of her office. She leaned back in her obsidian chair, her sharp nails tapping lightly against the armrest. "That's what I like to hear, Belial," she purred. "Rebellion has no place in this family. Continue being a good boy and you won't have any problems here." Izuku nodded vigorously, his face a picture of obedience. He had learned the hard way that he should always do the best. And the best is to obey. Lilith's approval was like a lifeline. As long as she's happy, Izuku won't be hurt. "Thank you, Lady Lilith," he stammered. "Thank you for being so patient with me." Lilith's crimson gaze bore into him as if searching for any trace of insincerity. Satisfied, she leaned forward, her fingers interlocking as she rested her chin on them. "Belial, my dear, you are quite exceptional," she said, getting up as Izuku looked at the floor in fear. "You've proven to be more valuable than you may realize." Izuku kept looking at the floor as he felt a hand falling on his hair. Dr. Asmodeus's research had stagnated for some time, but you gave her a breakthrough, she murmured, her fingers moving gently through his hair. "Mammon also holds you in high regard." The hand on his hair was supposed to feel comforting, but it felt anything but. He felt violated. Izuku didn't want to be helping villains. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want to be a villain. But he had no choice. Izuku forced himself not to cry. It wouldn't do him any good at the moment. Lilith's hand went down his face, her fingers brushing his cheek as she leaned in dangerously close to his closed upper eyes. "You're doing exceptionally, darling," she said softly. "Continue like this, and we may even grant you some actual privileges." She leaned in further, planting a kiss on his forehead. Izuku felt like throwing up despite his empty stomach, but he forced himself to just nod. "Why yes, my lady," he forced himself to say. "Mammon-sama mentioned that you had a mission for me." "That's correct," Lilith said with a smile. "Don't worry, I've chosen an easy target for my little assassin's first mission. And you won't be going alone." "What is the mission, Lady Lilith?" Izuku asked hesitantly. Lilith got up and went back to her seat, leaning on it. "Don't fret over the details, dear. Leviathan will be your partner for this assignment. He will provide you with all the necessary information once you reach the location." She briefly glanced at the clock on the wall. "You shall depart immediately. That will be all." She clapped dismissively. Izuku nodded, knowing better than to question further. He turned and headed for the door with a heavy heart. He didn't know what the mission would be, but he had a sinking suspicion, and he hated it. Izuku and Leviathan, disguised as an old man, navigated the crowded streets of the Mustafu's poor region. They both wore matching suits, which obviously made them stand out in the middle of such a poor area. It was obvious that description wasn't on the agenda for today. Leviathan, in his elderly persona, moved with a hunched gait, relying heavily on a cane as if every step was an effort. The smell of trash and drugs filled Izuku's nostrils as he walked, but he ignored it in favor of silently following Leviathan's slow pace. The man could easily get into character regardless of the form he took, but Izuku really wished he would choose someone who could walk a little faster. As they walked, Izuku kept thinking of what the mission could be. He knew he was trained to be an assassin, so his mission would obviously be an assassination. But who could the target be? Why were they being so secretive? After what felt like an eternity of wandering through the decaying district, they arrived at a ramshackle building adorned with graffiti-covered walls. Leviathan came to a halt, turning to Izuku with a glint of anticipation beneath the facade of the frail old man. Dread settled in Izuku's chest as he surveyed the scene. It was someone's home. Leviathan shifted his disguise, transforming into a young woman with long red hair and piercing blue eyes. Her. Grinned at Izuku, who couldn't hide his fear. "There we are, Belial," Leviathan said with an unsettling cheerfulness. "Why are we here, Leviathan-san?" Izuku couldn't suppress his anxiety. "To set an example," Leviathan replied, his tone chillingly casual. "An example?" Izuku echoed, his voice quivering with unease. "Yes, Belial." Leviathan's sinister smile remained firmly in place. "Someone borrowed money from us and failed to repay. We're here to show the consequences of defying our family." Izuku's gaze fell upon the dilapidated house. He couldn't help but wonder how desperate its owner must have been to resort to borrowing money from the 9 circles of hell. Is this wise? He found himself asking, his conscience nagging at him. Dead people can't pay debts. Leviathan burst into laughter, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "Oh, we're well aware of that," she said between chuckles. "This debtor owes us the least. As I mentioned, it's all about setting an example." Izuku frowned at the moral quandary. "So, we kill them as a message to the others," he summarized with a heavy heart. "To say, this is what will happen if you don't pay." "You've got it." Leviathan nodded, her smirk unyielding. "You just got a single thing wrong, though. We won't kill them. You will." Izuku's blood ran cold at Leviathan's words. Horror washed over him as he stared at her, struggling to comprehend the gruesome task she was asking him to undertake. It was one thing to be entangled in a criminal organization's activities, but to take a life. You want me to?" His voice trembled, unable to articulate the chilling task being demanded of him. "You've done it before," Leviathan replied calmly. "You can do it again." "I didn't have a choice then," Izuku protested, desperation creeping into his voice. "But now. Lilith has high expectations for you, Belial," Leviathan interjected, causing Izuku to freeze. "You wouldn't want to disappoint her, would you? What if they have a family?" Desperation fueled Izuku's next plea. "Children. Loved ones." He does," Leviathan confirmed, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "A wife and a 10-year-old son. The boy is positively adorable." She chuckled darkly. "You'll be responsible for ending both the husband and wife. What happens to the child will be your choice." Izuku's heart sank further, dread gnawing at him as he dared to ask. "You mean? You can provide the boy with a merciful end?" Leviathan continued, her grin widening. "Or you can let him live and we'll take him. Asmodeus has been wanting a new doll for her collection." Izuku's mind raced as he grappled with the agonizing decision before him. Either he's the one who will have to kill a kid only a few years older than Izuku himself, or leave him to the clutches of Dr. Asmodeus and her cruel experiments. He knew there wasn't a right answer to this dilemma. Yet, there was only one possible answer for that. Izuku wouldn't wish the suffering he has to endure upon anyone. Let alone a kid. Izuku approached the decrepit house with heavy footsteps. His heart pounded in his chest as if it, too, were begging him to find another way. But there was no escape from this moral abyss. Raising his hand to knock, Izuku hesitated as he heard laughter coming from inside. With a deep breath, he summoned the last of his resolve and rapped on the door. Moments later, a man, likely in his late 20s, opened the door, his eyes filled with kindness. "I've never seen you around here, kid. Are you lost?" he asked, glancing down at Izuku. Izuku shook his head, his voice quivering with a heavy burden. "I'm sorry, sir," he began, revealing the brand on his hand. "I don't have a choice. I promise I'll be quick." The man's expression shifted to one of fear. "Wait." He gasped, but before he could react, Izuku thrust one of his spider-like limbs into the man's forehead, ending his life instantly. As the lifeless body crumpled to the floor, blood oozing from the hole in his forehead, Izuku heard a terrified scream and turned to see a woman, probably the same age as the man, staring at him with wide eyes. Tears welled up in Izuku's own eyes as he saw her fear, but he knew he had a mission to complete. She tried to run, but Izuku was quick to catch up to her, biting her arm. She fell to the floor, screaming in agony from Izuku's venom. With a heavy heart, he stabbed her in the forehead just like her husband, granting her a merciful death and sparing her from the agony of his venom. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the house, drawing Izuku's attention. He found a closed door with a nameplate that read Yuki. Clenching his fists, Izuku broke through the door with his spider legs and entered the room. He heard a muffled sobbing coming from under the bed. The boy was clearly trying to keep quiet. Memories of his own past came to Izuku's mind. All the times he had hidden under his bed in fear. He never imagined he would become the monster he once feared. With a heavy heart and tears in his eyes, Izuku approached the bed, his voice quivering. "I'm sorry," he whispered, unable to contain his sorrow any longer. "I'm so sorry." He thrust a spear-like limb downward, easily piercing the mattress and into the soft flesh of the young boy. A soft gasp, then silence. Izuku stood there, tears streaming down his face, as the blood of the little boy ran through the floor, staining his shoes. Leaving the house, Leviathan reappeared next to Izuku, holding a bag of popcorn as if she had just come from a movie theater. "You put on quite a show," Leviathan remarked, her tone casual. "You're great at that. A bit merciful, but I guess it's part of your charm." Tears still glistening in his eyes, Izuku could only manage a nod in response. "Are we done here?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and despair. "Almost, darling," Leviathan replied, a sinister smirk tugging at her lips. "It wouldn't be a message if we didn't leave a way for people to know it was us, right? Don't worry, I'll take care of this part. You can just sit and rest." She handed him a handkerchief. "Also, you have blood on your face. Wipe it off." With trembling hands, Izuku wiped away the red stains on his face, his breath shaky and uneven. The enormity of what he had just done weighed heavily on him and he couldn't contain the torrent of emotions any longer. He sank to his hands and knees, the empty popcorn bag falling from his grasp, and he began sobbing uncontrollably. Fear, anger, regret, sorrow, and countless other emotions washed over him, his tears falling like rain. Sometime later, Leviathan returned and found Izuku in this vulnerable state. In an unusual display of either compassion or mockery, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You really did great today, Belial. A few more missions, and you won't even feel anything anymore," she remarked, her voice carrying an odd mix of approval and indifference. "The quicker you learn, the better. Innocence doesn't get you far, Belial." Izuku continued to cry, the weight of his actions and the darkness that now enveloped him becoming all too real. The years went by like a blur for Izuku. The promise of a normal life. The dreams of becoming a hero. All shattered into irreparable fragments. He had become the perfect assassin for the 9 circles of hell, an obedient and emotionless weapon devoid of the spark that had once defined him. In the 3 years since his debut as Belial, Izuku hadn't failed a single mission. He had killed without hesitation, leaving behind a trail of victims whose faces haunted his nightmares. Their accusing eyes followed him into his restless sleep. It had reached a point where he no longer woke up screaming, he got used even to his nightmares. He remembered every detail of his targets, their names, their faces, their stories. Those memories were burned in his very soul, just like the brand on his hand. In the quiet moments of the night, he would see their faces, hear their cries, and feel their lives slipping away beneath his hands. Guilt and self-loathing were his only companions now. At the age of 10, Izuku had become little more than a hollow shell. He didn't smile, didn't talk to anyone unless absolutely necessary, and didn't react to the world around him. He merely existed, an automaton executing orders without question. His innocence had been sacrificed to the darkness he served. Like Leviathan said, innocence didn't get him far. The 9 circles of hell had kept their promise of providing him with some privileges. He had a room now, a modest one with a simple bed, but it was a luxury compared to everything he ever had. Yet, it meant nothing to him. The books he had received as rewards for his missions allowed him to continue his education, a small spark of the old Izuku's love for learning. But even that passion had been dulled, replaced by a mechanical disconnection. Sometimes, in the deepest recesses of his mind, Izuku wondered why he continued to endure this wretched existence. The thought of giving up crossed his mind more than once. But he couldn't summon the courage to end it all. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, a coward who couldn't do the right thing. Izuku sighed wearily as he heard heavy footsteps approaching his door. "I am here." A boisterous voice rang out, accompanied by the sound of a door being flung open. "To save you." All Might stood there in his usual hero pose and with his signature smile. Izuku had to admit it was quite impressive. Izuku didn't bother to lift his gaze from the book he was reading. He closed it and calmly walked over to a bookshelf in the corner, slipping it into its designated spot. "Another mission?" he asked with a tone that betrayed none of the resentment that had long festered within him. "Boy, you're not fun." All Might replied, and with a theatrical flourish, the hero facade vanished, revealing Leviathan in yet another one of her guises, this time as a young child. "Your reactions used to be so funny." Izuku ignored the comment, his focus solely on the impending mission. "Do we have another mission?" he asked again, his voice devoid of emotion. "Yes, we do." Leviathan replied with a casualness that sent a chill down Izuku's spine. A hero is sniffing around our business. Lilith wants them gone. Okay. Izuku said, his movements methodical as he began to prepare for the mission. Who's the target this time? Leviathan's grin widened. Oh, based on what Mammon told me, I think you'll enjoy this mission. She said with a laugh. Your target is Rock Lock. I can't save you, kid. The words echoed in Izuku's mind. Go back with him. Rock Lock, the hero who had once seen him pleading for help and yet had heartlessly sent him back to his abusers. It was a twisted form of poetic justice, an opportunity for revenge he had never expected. As he deftly tied his tie, Izuku glanced at the mirror and found himself smiling. The very thought of ending a hero's life brought a dark satisfaction that chilled his own heart. If he relished the idea of killing, if he had truly become one of them, then perhaps there was nothing left of the boy who had once aspired to be a hero. However, as Izuku's mind drifted back to that fateful encounter with Rock Lock, he could only think one thing. Karma is a bitch. Izuku perched silently on the rooftop of a building, his eyes fixed on the darkened alley below. Leviathan stood next to him, but he was here just to watch over Izuku as always. This was Izuku's mission, and he had honestly wanted to do this alone. His target had been lured to this location by a false lead the 9 circles of hell gave. As Izuku watched the hero approach the alley, his heart remained as still as the night around him. Supposedly, a deal would be happening here tonight, but as the hero went deeper into the dark alley, he found nothing. It was in this eerie quiet that Izuku decided to make his move. Without a sound, he descended from the rooftop, his spider legs bracing the impact and allowing him to land silently. Rock Lock's attention was solely focused on the dead-end alley, his senses on high alert. He didn't see or hear Izuku approaching until it was too late. With a sudden and chilling presence, Izuku emerged from the darkness, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling determination. The hero turned, realizing too late that he had walked right into a trap. Izuku's assault was swift and merciless. Without uttering a single word, he delivered a powerful kick to the back of the hero's head, sending him crashing into the alley's unforgiving brick wall. The surprise attack left Rock Lock dazed and disoriented, unable to react in time. Before the hero could fully comprehend what was happening, Izuku dropped down on him. Despite his tiny body, Izuku's bones were made of pure quicksilver. This made him weigh over 300 pounds. The razor-sharp appendages restrained Rock Lock, pinning his arms and legs against the cold ground. With an eerie calmness, Izuku spoke, his voice laced with a haunting intensity that sent shivers down Rock Lock's spine. Hello Rock Lock. Remember me. The hero struggled to focus through the disorienting haze of pain and surprise. Slowly, recognition dawned in his eyes, and he squinted at Izuku. It was as if a long-buried memory had been unearthed. The kid. Rock Lock gasped, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and horror. You're alive. No thanks to you. Izuku retorted, his words cutting like a knife. Rock Lock's eyes filled with a complex brew of emotions: guilt, remorse, and something else. He hesitated for a moment before finally finding the courage to ask, what did they do to you? Do you want to know? Izuku tilted his head, his eerie gaze locked on the hero. The question hung heavily in the air, the tension between them almost unbearable. Rock Lock swallowed hard, his throat dry, but he nodded ever so slightly. Yes, I need to know. He replied, his voice barely a whisper. They made me a monster. Izuku replied, his tone cold and unforgiving. The kind of monster I never asked to become. They twisted me, Rock Lock. They molded me into their assassin. They turned me into Belial. The hero closed his eyes, and a single tear trickled down his cheek. I should have helped you. He admitted, his voice filled with the weight of his own regret. I'm so sorry, kid. I was a coward. Sorry won't change anything. Izuku replied icily, his grip on the hero's collar unyielding. Consider this your karma. As he prepared to strike the final blow, something small and unexpected fell from Rock Lock's utility belt. It was a small piece of paper, and Izuku's curiosity got the best of him at the moment. He snatched the paper, all while keeping the hero pinned in place, and his eyes widened at the image it held. It was a picture. In it, Rock Lock was captured in a moment of pure joy, cradling a small bundle of fabric with a radiant smile. Beside him stood a young woman, her eyes filled with happiness and warmth. You have, Izuku began to say, his voice trembling. My wife and son. Rock Lock explained, his voice breaking with emotion. He was born just a few months after my biggest mistake. He's the reason I finally understood how deeply I messed up with you, kid. I'm so sorry. For a moment, the alley seemed to fade into the background and Izuku was lost in the picture. He saw the genuine joy in Rock Lock's eyes, the happiness that had eluded him for so long. There was a family, a wife, a son. The life that might have been Izuku's had fate taken a different path. Why? Izuku's voice trembled with a mixture of anger, sadness, and desperation. Why couldn't anyone save me? Why didn't anyone love me? What did I do to deserve this life? Kid. Shut up. Izuku's voice cracked with raw emotion. You left me. You had the power to save me, but you didn't. How dare you call yourself a hero? I'm going to end this right now. With murderous intent, Izuku brought down his spider-like limb with all the force he could muster, aiming for the hero's forehead. His mind was filled with a blazing desire for vengeance. He wanted to make Rock Lock pay for abandoning him. But in a split second, before the fatal blow landed, the image of a bright-eyed young boy with green hair and freckles flashed vividly in Izuku's mind. At that moment, he could see the boy looking into his eyes and shaking his head. His attack stopped just millimeters from the hero's forehead, and with a trembling hand, Izuku pulled back his deadly limb, allowing Rock Lock to gasp for breath. Kid. Rock Lock's voice quivered with a mixture of fear and relief as Izuku got up and walked away. Leave. Izuku's tone was frigid, devoid of any emotion. There was no lead. This was a trap. The implications of Izuku's words hit Rock Lock like a tidal wave. He had been lured here to his death. Yet, Izuku was letting him go. Kid, come with me. The hero tried to plead, taking a hesitant step forward. I can save you this time. I can help. Why? Izuku's response was swift and deadly. His spider-like limb shot forward again, stopping just before Rock Lock's nose, and the hero froze in his tracks. I'm sparing your life. Izuku declared, his voice like ice. But make no mistake. I didn't forgive you. I'm not going to trust you. I hate you. He yelled the final words with an intensity that sent a shiver down Rock Lock's spine. So, leave. Before I change my mind. Rock Lock hesitated for a moment, his gaze locked with Izuku's. He understood the gravity of the situation, and he knew that this bridge had been irrevocably burned. He had failed to save Izuku when it mattered most. Okay, I understand. Rock Lock said, his voice heavy with regret. I'm so sorry, kid. Izuku's response was cold and unyielding. Words are worthless. He said. I don't need your pity. With that, Rock Lock turned and walked away, leaving Izuku alone in the dimly lit alley. The young assassin watched him for a few more moments, his heart heavy with a mix of emotions. He knew that his actions would have consequences, but at that moment, he couldn't bring himself to care. Hitachi isn't an obsessive person. It's just that when he gets curious about something, he can't let it go until he learns more. For example, once, he got interested in cats and spent weeks looking up all sorts of weird facts about them. Like, did you know that the pattern of a cat's whiskers is unique to each cat, similar to human fingerprints? Another time, he wanted to know all about underground heroes, so he scoured the internet for sightings of them. He already knew about Eraserhead even before being adopted by him. But now, Hitachi's latest interest obsession. Hitachi. Let's put the right label. Shut up, Dad. Was spiders. Ever since he met that boy with spider legs on his back at the library, Hitachi wanted to talk to him again. That boy was skittish, always on the edge of running away. But when he talked about books, he did it with so much passion that it fascinated Hitachi. The boy also had this low opinion of himself, saying Hitachi deserved a friend who wasn't worthless. It was just something about him that drew Hitachi in like a moth to a lantern. He couldn't help himself. Plus, overhearing Dad talk to Uncles Ashi and learning that this boy was a vigilante only added fuel to his curiosity. So, for the past few weeks, Hitachi had been reading everything he could find about spiders. Spiders use hydraulic pressure to move their legs, they don't have muscles in their legs. They rely on internal fluids to extend and retract their limbs. Today, he found himself wandering near the library, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spider boy again. He asked the librarian, but she hadn't seen the boy in a while. She seemed worried, which only made Hitachi more determined to find him. However, as he walked, he seemed to have misjudged just how dangerous this area could be. It wasn't that late, but the sun was starting to set and the streets were getting emptier. Just as Hitachi thought of heading home, a sudden grip on his arm yanked him into an alley. A knife pressed against his neck. Give me everything, kid. The wide-eyed man demanded. Hitachi knew he could take this guy down, but he didn't want to risk getting into trouble for using his quirk illegally, even in self-defense. Besides, the guy seemed drugged and unpredictable. Although the man's hold on the knife was loose, attempting to disarm him was dangerous. The safest choice was to give up what little he had, a few bucks he always kept on him for the train and maybe a snack and his cell phone, and walk away with his life. With a resigned sigh, Hitachi opened his mouth to comply, but before he could say anything, a blur zipped past his face, and he was suddenly free. Blinking in surprise, he turned to see the mugger sprawled on the ground with a broken nose. Standing next to him was the familiar boy with green hair and 8 spider legs coming from his back. I wouldn't recommend staying here when it's late. The boy cautioned. Hitachi studied him, recognizing the boy from their encounter at the library. His attire was somewhat similar, but with jeans instead of basketball shorts and a green hoodie to match. Lesson learned. Hitachi replied with a nonchalant shrug. But it's good to see you again, Greenie. The boy paused, casting a brief glance at Hitachi. The boy from the library. He said. Shinsu, was it? Yep. Hitachi confirmed with a nod. You didn't tell me your name, so I'll keep calling you Greenie. Greenie simply shrugged and began restraining the unconscious mugger with zip ties. It's the third time I've stopped you this month. He muttered to the unconscious man. Can you give me a break? So, spider brat, huh? Hitachi remarked. Greenie froze, his eyes widening as he turned to face Hitachi. How do you know? He asked. Hitachi let out a snort of amusement. For one, there aren't many people with a mutation like yours. He gestured to the spider legs folded on Greenie's back. 2. Normal folks don't go around saving strangers from muggers, let alone carry zip ties. And 3. You just confirmed it. Greenie couldn't help but chuckle at Hitachi's observations. Hitachi is just glad he didn't run away. You've got a point. Greenie admitted, his tone relaxed. So, spider brat. Hitachi grinned, clearly enjoying the interaction. I don't see a lot of vigilantes in this area. Well, technically, this isn't my territory. Greenie replied. I was just taking a walk when I saw the guy. He tried to mug me once. He's always trying something around here. One would think the police would have arrested him already. Hitachi said with a frown. Greenie's expression darkened at that. The police are almost as useless as heroes. He spat, full of venom. Guess you don't have good experiences with the police and heroes, huh? Hitachi said softly. I can relate. I used to get a lot of shit because of my quirk. A police officer once tried to frame me for a murder. Good thing I had been adopted already and Pops wouldn't have any of that bullshit. Greenie sighed deeply. There are a few good heroes, I won't deny. He admitted. But I don't trust them. Learned the hard way that I can't trust anyone but myself. Hitachi frowned at the admission. It was becoming evident that the boy was likely in the system or even homeless. However, he decided not to pry further. So, you saved me. Hitachi said. How about I get you an ice cream as a thank you? Oh, don't worry. Greenie replied. I didn't help you wanting to be paid. It's fine. I insist. Hitachi countered. There's a great stall not far from here. Please. He offered a friendly smile. Greenie hesitated for a moment, then his expression softened. Alright, then. Greenie agreed with a small smile. I guess an ice cream wouldn't hurt. But that settled, the two walked together to the nearby ice cream stall. It was a quaint little place with a variety of flavors and toppings to choose from. Hitachi got a vanilla cone, while Greenie chose a taro cone. They sat down on a nearby bench and talked some more. Neither delved into the details of their lives, but Hitachi could see that the boy was opening up to him. He couldn't help but smile at that. I'm just saying. Greenie said, waving a hand around. Cursed child never should have existed. There was literally no reason for that book to be released. He angrily took a bite of his cone. This book ruined so many things from the rest of the series. Hitachi couldn't help but smile at Greenie's passionate expression. The boy looked adorable like this. Wait, what? No. Bad Hitachi. Stop thinking like that. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his forehead. Are you okay, Shinsu? Greenie asked worriedly. You're looking kinda red and you didn't answer. Hitachi blushed harder and batted the hand away. I'm fine. Hitachi said. Guess I'm a little tired. It's been a long day. You can say that again. Greenie chuckled, finishing his ice cream. Do you live close? I have to catch the train. Hitachi replied before looking up. Guess I should be on my way. Let me get you to the station. Greenie said with a smile. It's dangerous to go alone. Hitachi snorted at the phrasing. Are you going to give me a sword? He asked. Why would I have a sword? Greenie asked, tilting his head. The fact that the reference went over his head is honestly very sad. He hopes he can show Zelda to Greenie one day. But that's a plan for the future. It was just a joke. Hitachi said with a smile. Let's go. Greenie nodded and they started walking. As they went, Hitachi wasn't sure if he should try to start a conversation or let the silence hang. All too soon, they reached the train station. Well. This is where we part ways. Greenie said. It was nice talking to you again, Shinsu. Yeah. Hitachi replied with a smile. I hope we can meet again. You're very cool, Greenie. I'd like to be your friend. Greenie blinked at him a few times. Why? He asked, clearly surprised by the offer. You deserve a better friend than a. Don't call yourself worthless, Greenie. Hitachi interrupted. You're a nice boy who loves books and spends your night saving people. There's nothing worthless about you. Greenie hesitated for a moment, his gaze dropping to the ground. You don't know that. He replied, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Shinsu, you have no idea about my past. What I did. What I was forced to do. I'm not friend material. Itachi was taken aback by the sudden outburst, but he quickly recovered and took a step ahead, putting both hands on Greeny's shoulders. He's so small. He's the same age as Hitachi. He shouldn't be that small. I really don't know about your past. Hitachi said, his tone calm and reassuring. If you ever want to share it, I will listen. But I promise I won't care. Because your past doesn't define you. People have to do bad things to survive sometimes. That doesn't make you a bad person. A bad person wouldn't be out on the streets risking their life to help people who will likely not even thank them. Greeny looked at him with wide eyes, clearly not used to hearing such words of understanding and acceptance. You don't need to trust me completely. Hitachi continued. You don't need to tell me your name now. Or ever. But this world is too cruel to tread alone. He got the last line from a fortune cookie, but Greeny didn't need to know that. Greeny hesitated for a second, then nodded softly. Okay. We can be friends, Shinsu. Hitachi smiled warmly and pulled a paper from his pocket, quickly scribbling his number. Here. He said, offering the paper with a smile. Greeny hesitated for a second before responding, I don't have a phone. Hitachi blinked, momentarily surprised. It was easy to forget that not everyone had a phone, but it also made him wonder about Greeny's circumstances. No phone? Hitachi asked. He didn't want to pry, but he couldn't help but feel concern for his new friend. Well, I guess you can still call me from a phone cab if you ever need it. He offered genuinely. And I mean it. You can call me at any moment. I will do my best to help you. Greeny nodded at him with a small smile on his face. Okay, Shinsu. He said gratefully. Thank you. Can we meet at the library? Hitachi asked. It's been a while since I've been there. Greeny frowned, deep in thought. The librarian must be worried. She is. Hitachi confirmed. I'll start going again. Greeny decided. Now that I know I'm not, he trailed off, shaking his head. I'm usually there during school hours. But I also go on weekends. Then I'll see you on Saturday. Hitachi said. He noticed his train arriving. Oh, my train. Gotta go. Bye, Greeny. He began to run towards the approaching train, just as Greeny hesitated for a moment. Then, just as Hitachi was about to enter the train, he heard his new friend call out. Izuku. Greeny said just before the doors closed. Hitachi's eyes widened and a genuine smile crept onto his face. Izuku, huh? Hitachi mumbled to himself. That's a nice name. Izuku silently climbed back up the building a few seconds after Rocklock had disappeared from view. He still wasn't sure why he spared the hero. It wasn't as if this was the first time he'd been ordered to kill one. However, it was the first time he'd ever gone against an order. Panic was already starting to rise within him. He knew Lilith wouldn't be happy with him. On the rooftop, Leviathan awaited him. Her expression was a mix of a scowl and a smirk. You know. She began, I always told Lilith you were weak, that it was only a matter of time until you failed. But I didn't think you would choose to fail on purpose. She won't be happy, you know. I know. Izuku replied quietly. I wonder what your punishment will be. Leviathan continued, taunting him. Maybe she'll let Beelzebub have his fun with you. He's been saying he misses spending time with you. Or perhaps she'll have Mammon train you again. Or maybe she'll decide you're a waste of time and finally allow Asmodeus to add you to her collection. As she grinned at him, Izuku felt his blood boil. He had experienced fear, sadness, frustration, and hopelessness throughout all his life. Those were all feelings he was very familiar with. But what he felt now was entirely different. His blood was boiling, and he had an overwhelming desire to break something, to hurt someone, to scream, to vent. Leviathan's words had pushed him over the edge, and he recognized the feeling. It was so much like he had seen his father act all the time. And that's when he realized what he was truly feeling. For the first time in his life, Izuku was angry. Are you even listening to me? Leviathan called, snapping her fingers in front of him. You know, after messing up so badly, the least you could do is to he. Before he even realized what he was doing, Izuku had one of his spear-like spider legs plunged through Leviathan's heart. His eyes widened as he realized the gravity of his actions. Leviathan stared at him in absolute shock. Izuku could have pulled away and rushed with Leviathan to Dr. Asmodeus before it was too late. Begged for forgiveness in the hopes that they'd spare his life after such treason. And maybe, things could go back to normal. But that was not what he did. Instead, he took a step forward and bit Leviathan's arm. His venom acted swiftly, and the only reason she didn't start screaming was because she couldn't draw a breath to do so. In an instant, Leviathan's disguise vanished, revealing her true form, a middle-aged woman with disheveled hair and rotting teeth. She slumped to the floor, and a few seconds later, her movement ceased entirely. She was dead. As Izuku stared at Leviathan's lifeless body on the floor, he felt something bubble up in his throat. Just like the anger, it was an emotion he'd never experienced before. And as he gazed at Leviathan's lifeless form, he couldn't help it. For the first time in his life. Izuku laughed. 1 down. 7 to go. Izuku gleefully muttered to himself as he approached the villainous complex that had imprisoned him for so long. For years, he had lived in constant fear of the 9 circles of hell, but who would have thought that all this time, he didn't need anyone to save him. He could free himself. All he had to do was what they had trained him for, to become an assassin. To gain his freedom, Izuku just needed to do one thing. Kill them. He could feel the still fresh blood on his face and suit. He never realized just how pretty the crimson color really was. As he strolled through the complex, he knew there was likely an unhinged smile on his face. But it didn't matter. He was free, and he reveled in it. Asmodeus, Beelzebub, Belphegor, Lilith, Lucifer, Mammon, and Satan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He counted on his fingers, contemplating where to begin. I'll start with the most troublesome ones. With a smile, he started skipping his way toward the solitary cells. The rooms were all soundproof, something Satan loved, as it helped him remain calm. Izuku knew that attacking Satan without a plan would be suicide, and angry Satan was the second scariest thing he'd ever seen in this place. He would need to be clever. As he pushed open the door, he saw a series of cells and went straight to the last one. The sound of classical music filled the air as he approached Satan, who had his eyes closed, lost in playing an imaginary violin. Izuku crept up with slow, deliberate steps. Once he was close enough, he jumped onto Satan's back, unbalancing the scrawny man and knocking him to the ground. What? Satan blurted out, trying to turn around, only to see Izuku perched on his back. What are you? Bye-bye, Satan-san. Izuku giggled and then sank his teeth into the man's neck. Arg. You little. Satan yelled, trying to toss Izuku away. I'll kill you. Izuku sprang backward, watching as the man rose, his scrawny frame filling with bulging muscles. He started advancing toward Izuku, who simply waved at him. You're already dead, Satan-san. Izuku said, his voice filled with amusement. Then he turned his back on Satan, leaving the cell. Get back here, you little. Satan tried to take a step, then collapsed to his knees as Izuku's venom took effect. Blood started oozing from his nose, mouth, and eyes. I'm gonna kill you. He fell forward, reverting to his scrawny form once more. Izuku sealed the cell shut, silencing the classical music, and walked away. 2 down. He sang out cheerfully as he started to skip again. 6 to go. Izuku continued to skip through the facility's corridors, greeting the cameras with cheerful waves. After years of captivity, he knew every inch of the place like the back of his hand. He had memorized the locations of every room and every camera. He was heading to the monitoring room next, but he had no worries about the cameras. The villains were too arrogant. Despite having cameras all over the facility, they only had one person to watch them. As he opened the door to the monitoring room, he found exactly what he expected. Belphegor was slouched in front of the bank of monitors, sound asleep. Why they always left the laziest person Izuku had ever known in charge of the cameras remained a mystery, but he wasn't complaining. It worked in his favor. Izuku approached her, briefly considering waking her up so she could witness what was about to happen. However, he decided against it. Belphegor was mostly harmless. In all the years Izuku had been there, she had never directly harmed him. So, he would grant her a small mercy. Stopping in front of Belphegor, he raised one of his spider legs and drove it through her forehead. Her death was instant and she didn't even open her eyes. Izuku withdrew his spider leg, wiped the blood from the metallic limb on her dress, and nodded at her lifeless form. Goodbye, Belphegor-san. He murmured as he left the room. 3 down K. He sang, 5 more to go K. Hello, Beelzebub-san. Izuku called out as he entered the room. Beelzebub's room looked more like a butcher's shop straight out of a slasher movie than an actual bedroom. Hooks adorned the walls, each one having a lifeless body hanging from it. The bodies were all covered in bite marks, with a particular preference for the upper arms and shoulders. Beelzebub looked taken aback when he saw Izuku, especially given the boy's bloody appearance. What do you want, runt? Beelzebub asked, arching an eyebrow, his customary metallic smile in place. Did Lilith send you? Izuku approached him, a disturbingly sweet smile on his face. Oh, no. This has nothing to do with her. He replied casually, his voice laced with malice. I'm just here for a little payback. You seem to enjoy biting so much. Without hesitation, he opened his mouth and sunk his teeth into Beelzebub's shoulder. Yeah. He mused, savoring the moment. I can see the appeal. What did you? Beelzebub began to say, but the venom was already taking effect. Go to hell, Beelzebub. Izuku sneered with a twisted smile before taking a step back and sitting on the floor. Beelzebub tried to reach for him, but the venom acted swiftly, causing him to crumple to the floor, writhing in agony. Izuku watched with a smile as the man started bleeding and screaming while clutching his chest. He was dead within moments. "Hey, Beelz, I need your help," with a voice called from the door. Izuku turned around and saw Lucifer entering the room. Something. His eyes widened as he saw Beelzebub dead on the floor. "Belial!" Lucifer exclaimed. "What are you?" "Four down K," Izuku sang as he got up and started walking towards Lucifer. "Four more to go K." Lucifer's eyes widened and he quickly opened his arms. "Pride flash," he said, and a rainbow flash momentarily blinded Izuku. Once his vision returned, Lucifer had already vanished. "Ooh, are we playing hide and seek, Lu-chan?" Izuku grinned as he walked out of the room. "I love hide and seek." Lucifer was a very prideful man. He wore flashy clothes and his steps always oozed confidence. One word to describe him would surely be flamboyant. But his flamboyance turned out to be his worst weakness. Lucifer had the stealth skills of a peacock. Following him through the corridors was laughably easy for Izuku. Using his spider legs, he clung to the ceiling, tracking the vain villain like a predator stalking its prey. A persistent giggle escaped him as he closed in. "Lu-chan," he called mockingly. "Where are you?" The door slammed shut and Izuku chuckled as he figured out where Lucifer had gone. It was Izuku's own room. Without hesitation, Izuku broke down the door and stepped inside, spotting Lucifer with his back against a bookshelf filled with Izuku's books. "Found you, Lu-chan," Izuku declared, his grin unsettling. Izuku preened as he watched a prideful man cower in fear against the wall. Izuku took deliberate noisy steps toward him, stopping right in front of him. "What are you doing, Belial?" Lucifer stammered. Izuku ignored him and reached for a book on the shelf. "I never properly thanked you for the books you got me," Izuku said, his tone shifting from menacing to almost casual. "They were one of the few things that kept me sane here. Of all the villains, you were one of the least horrible, Lu-chan." "Then let me go," Lucifer pleaded. "I won't ever get in your way, Bell," he cut himself. "I mean. You don't even know my real name, do you?" Izuku tilted his head, a wicked smile on his face. "It doesn't matter." He focused on the book and Lucifer tried to escape but Izuku impaled his leg with a spider leg, causing him to crash to the floor. "This is the skin of a killer, Bella." Izuku read from the book, a hint of disdain in his voice. "You know." He closed the book with a loud snap. "Twilight sucks." "Belial," Lucifer called out in desperation. "I can't let you go, Lucifer," Izuku stated coldly. "After today, I'll either be free or dead. And I won't leave anyone who could come after me in the future." He grinned at the man on the floor. "So, bye-bye, Lucifer." "Wait." Lucifer began, but his plea was cut short as Izuku pierced his neck with a spider leg. Lucifer stared at Izuku with wide, horrified eyes as he bled out on the floor, trying to reach with his hand until it fell limp by his side. "5 down K," Izuku sang as he left the room, casually tossing the book over his shoulder. 3 to go K. The book landed on Lucifer's face, covering his lifeless eyes. Izuku couldn't contain his laughter as he approached Mammon's room. The sheer arrogance of these villains amused him. He had killed 5 of them already, as subtle as a sledgehammer, and they hadn't realized a thing. No alarms, no pursuit, nothing. Shaking his head, he broke through the locked door to Mammon's room and entered. The room was a bizarre mix of a treasury and a torture chamber. Shiny trinkets littered the space, interspersed with a macabre collection of torture instruments. It was just as Izuku had expected. "What are you doing here, Belial?" Mammon growled menacingly as he glared at Izuku. Just yesterday, this would have sent Izuku cowering in fear. But today, he simply smiled and took a step toward Mammon. "Hey there, Mammon-sama." He cooed in mock sweetness. "Heard from the others. Things are getting pretty bloody, you know." Mammon's frown deepened as he grasped the implications. His eyes widened in realization. "What did you?" "Levi, Sat, Belfi, Beelz, and Lu-chan," Izuku said with a grin. "You're the 6th. And I'm going to enjoy this." He lunged, stabbing straight through Mammon's chest. But in the blink of an eye, Mammon disappeared. "Oh, just a clone." Izuku pouted, glancing around the room. His eyes landed on a particularly precious-looking vase. "Ooh, this looks expensive. You better show yourself, Mammon-sama, or I'm going to smash this next," he threatened. 5, 4, 3, 2. "Don't you dare, you brat." Mammon suddenly reappeared and lunged at Izuku with a taser. But Izuku was ready, swiftly dodging and tossing Mammon to the floor. "Your training really paid off, Mammon-sama," Izuku remarked with a grin as he pinned Mammon with his spider legs, stabbing his hands and legs. "I can take down people much bigger than me now." "Fucking brat, we should have killed you." Mammon spat. "Yes, you should have." Izuku agreed, taking the taser that Mammon had dropped. "Oh, I remember this one." We had so much fun with it. He turned the dial to the maximum setting. Let's play one more time. For old time's sake. He pressed the taser against Mammon's neck. Wait, Belial, don't. Go to hell. Izuku said with a smile and activated the taser. He watched as Mammon screamed and convulsed under the electric shock. Izuku didn't stop, keeping it on Mammon's neck for several seconds, even after the man stopped moving. You lasted much less than I thought. Izuku mused as he got up, stabbing Mammon's stomach for good measure. 6 down K. He sang as he left the room. 2 more to go K. He left the room, leaving behind the lifeless body of Mammon. As Izuku approached Lilith's office, he couldn't help but glance down at the brand on the back of his hand. This mark was the biggest threat to his plan. As long as it existed, he couldn't disobey any orders Lilith gave him. However, Izuku had always loved quirk analysis, and he'd had more than enough time to analyze just how Lilith's quirk worked. For her quirk to take effect, 2 conditions had to be met. 1. The target needed to be branded, just like Izuku was. 2. The target had to hear Lilith's orders. And that was Izuku's way in. Without hesitation, Izuku drove his spider legs into his ears, piercing his eardrums. He barely flinched at the pain and ignored the blood seeping from his ears. He had endured much worse things here. The important thing was that it worked. He could no longer hear a thing. With this newfound immunity, he kicked open Lilith's office door and entered. Lilith's eyes widened in shock as she began speaking, but Izuku couldn't hear her. He knew he could read her lips if he wished to understand her words, but why bother? Instead, he lunged at her, driving one of his spider legs into her shoulder, sending her crashing to the floor. Pinning her down, he was poised to end her life swiftly, but then an idea struck him. This was the perfect opportunity to gather some vital information. So, he grabbed her by the collar and stared into her eyes, baring his teeth threateningly. Lie to me, and you're dead. He warned, making it clear that he wouldn't hesitate to use his venom. You know how painful my venom can be. Tell me, who else works for you? I'm not interested in mere underlings you control with your quirk. I want to know about the real players, past and present. If he was going to eliminate them, he couldn't afford any loose ends. He watched Lilith's lips move and focused on reading them. Lucifer and Satan. They were newcomers. She revealed. The roles previously belonged to other individuals. Boo. Izuku growled, pressing for more information. Inko and Hisashi. She replied, causing Izuku's eyes to widen. He stared at her incredulously. It's the truth. Inko was the former Lucifer and Hisashi was the former Satan. Izuku had often wondered about his parents' connection to Lilith. Now it made sense. They hated him for his villainous quirk, yet they had been villains themselves. A bitter chuckle escaped him at the irony. With a sigh, he released Lilith and stood up. She began to rise as well, but Izuku wasn't about to let her escape. He stabbed her through the chest and she fell to the floor lifeless. Izuku calmly left the room. 7 down K. He sang. 1 no, 3 more to go K. He then made his way to Dr. Asmodeus's labs. Izuku held Dr. Asmodeus at the tip of his spider legs. One swift movement and her life would end. She was acutely aware of her vulnerability. Asmodeus wasn't a combatant, she was a doctor. Her expertise lay in labs and clinics, not in the field. Izuku knew she posed no physical threat to him. Very clever. Izuku read her lips. I warned Lilith that this weakness would be her downfall someday. She got what she deserved. Izuku growled, his tone laced with anger. Now, heal me. Dr. Asmodeus slowly extended her hands toward Izuku's ears and activated her quirk. He winced as the pain of his eardrums being pierced returned and then his hearing was restored. I never imagined you would have the audacity to do this. She said with a twisted grin. You truly are my magnum opus, Belial. My name is Izuku. He growled, frustration coursing through him. Belial, my dear. She replied dismissively. You are a perfected killing machine. Flawless. Remarkable. Forged to perfection through the crucible of life. I can't wait to see where your journey leads. Izuku sighed, realizing that she wasn't really listening to him. Asmodeus was arguably the most deranged among the 9 circles of hell. Although Mammon and Lilith were his primary tormentors, she had been the one who caused him the most pain. Yet, paradoxically, she was also the only one who had shown him any form of kindness and affection, albeit in her distorted way. Not unlike an inventor cherishing their creations. While she continued to monologue, Izuku knew he had to leave. He couldn't afford to linger any longer. With a heavy heart, he pierced her through the stomach and turned away. As he walked out and closed the door behind him, he left her behind to her fate. She stared after him, an unsettling grin on her face as blood oozed from the hole in her stomach. Why lovely Belial. She muttered to herself. What a magnificent specimen you are. Izuku stood atop a building, watching as the sirens of approaching firefighters pierced the night. Flames danced in the dark, consuming the complex below. It was a fire he had started hours ago, a fire that had slowly devoured everything in its path. He understood that by doing this, there would be no evidence left to identify the individuals inside. But he was content with that outcome. These people would become a mystery, a question mark in the minds of those who learned of their disappearance. And that was fine with Izuku. They didn't deserve attention or recognition. The 9 circles of hell would simply vanish, just as they had caused so many others to vanish. 8 down K. He sang softly to himself, a dark and haunting tune. Only 2 more to go K. Turning away from the blazing inferno, he added with a chilling smile, "Mommy. Daddy. I'm going home K." With that, he vanished into the night, leaving the fire's glow behind. Izuku descended from the building, his footsteps quiet as he moved through the shadows. He knew that if he encountered the police or a hero in his current state, it could spell trouble. His body was smeared with blood, a testament to the night's actions. As he walked through the dimly lit alley, something caught the corner of his eye. There, at the entrance, stood a figure he recognized all too well. It was one of the 3 heroes who had betrayed him in the past. Izuku would never forget those eyes, that costume, and the serpentine tongue. "Cobra?" He mumbled to himself, a dark grin forming on his face. The hero heard Izuku's deliberate footsteps and turned to look at him, spotting the blood-stained figure stepping into the light. "Oh, it's you." The hero grumbled, his gaze returning to the burning building. What the hell happened here? After all the boasting about their strength, they end up dead. Just like that. Lilith better be alive, I've gained too much from her. "They're all dead," Izuku stated, a chilling smile evident in his voice. "What do you mean?" Cobra frowned and turned to face Izuku. "Who could have possibly killed them?" "We," Izuku replied, his grin growing even more sinister. "And you're next, Cobra." Cobra's eyes widened with shock as he processed Izuku's words. It finally dawned on him that Izuku was in a horrifying state. You killed them?" Cobra stuttered, taking a cautious step back, his composure wavering. Izuku's laughter, chilling and surreal, echoed in the darkened alley. "Yes." He replied, his voice tinged with madness. "It was so easy. None of them expected their little assassin to turn on them. They truly believed they had me under control. Isn't that funny, Cobra-san?" Cobra swallowed hard, fear knotting his features. Izuku took a slow, deliberate step forward, and the hero's hands trembled as he fumbled for something concealed within his costume. But before he could react, Izuku's spider-like legs shot out with a swift calculated movement, stabbing through his arm. "Arg!" Cobra screamed, cradling his bleeding hand. "For someone who's supposed to be a hero, you're far too sloppy, Cobra-san." Izuku taunted, tilting his head with an eerie smile. "But you're no hero, are you? Heroes don't make deals with villains. Tell me, how much did you gain from Lilith? How long have you been working for her?" Cobra's expression shifted from surprise to one of pure fear. I didn't have a choice," he stammered, his voice quivering. "She had something on me, something that would ruin my career. I needed the money, the power she offered. I had to play both sides." Izuku's unsettling grin grew wider as he leaned in closer, his spider legs retracting, but ready to strike again. "Playing both sides, Cobra-san?" he asked. "How's that working out for you now?" "I swear, I didn't know you were going to do all this," Cobra pleaded. "I never meant for you to end up like this. I thought we had an understanding. I can help you, Belial. We can work together and I'll make sure you get a chance at a new life, a real life." "You think I'll believe you, Cobra?" Izuku hissed, his spider leg hovering ominously. "You're just a lying snake. You're part of the problem. You helped create me. You helped turn me into this monster. It's only fair that you assume the responsibility, right?" Cobra's face turned to Shen, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. "I'm sorry, Belial. I'm so sorry." He whimpered. Izuku's laughter filled the alley, a dark and haunting sound. "Your apologies won't change anything, Cobra-san," Izuku said. "Also, my name isn't Belial." With a sudden lunge, the spider leg pierced through Cobra's chest and he dragged the hero closer to his face, staring into his terrified eyes. "It's Izuku." Then he let the hero drop to the floor, lifeless. Izuku stared at the body for a few more seconds before throwing his head back and starting to laugh. As the sirens of approaching heroes grew louder, Izuku stepped out of the alley, disappearing into the shadows, his haunting laughter echoing in the night. Izuku doesn't like silence. All his life, everything was either silence or angry yells. Izuku hates both. Silence is just another reminder of his loneliness. Either at home with his parents or in the complex with the villains, he was always lonely. Izuku hates loneliness. He doesn't want to be alone anymore, but even in all his desperation for company, he also can't bring himself to trust the people he knows. He doesn't know what made him trust Shinsu enough to tell him his name, his true name. When he talked to the other boy, he felt less lonely. He almost felt like a normal person at that moment. But he wasn't a normal person. No amount of pretending would ever erase everything Izuku did. All the lives he took. At night, on the top of a building, Izuku sat at the edge, his legs dangling absent-mindedly as he looked to the sky, admiring the stars. He wouldn't start his patrol for a few more hours, so he tried to relax. But the silence was deafening. Nothing screams louder than the sound of silence. Slipping his hand into his hoodie pocket, Izuku feels the pocket radio he bought a few months ago on a whim. He's not sure what possessed him to spend a part of the little he normally earns, money that should have gone towards food or essentials, on something so trivial and pointless. It's not like Izuku has a good relationship with music either. Hell, he hates classical music. Even the mere sound of a violin is enough to remind him of Satan. And other than him, the 9 circles of hell didn't like music very much. The first time he ever heard anything other than the classic music Satan would use to keep calm was weeks after he escaped them. So, yeah. He had no idea what made him want to buy this radio. But ever since he got it, he would use it every Friday night. Not only was it a good way to keep the silence away, but he honestly liked the songs that played on the Put Your Hands Up radio. Tonight is no exception. Izuku knows that on Fridays, President Mick hosts his radio program, so he doesn't expect to see the man on patrol. Turning on the radio, Izuku hears a song already playing. It's been a week since Hisashi last patrolled with the little listener. He had to take time to get acquainted with his new hearing, and thus, he's been training non-stop. Chio scolded him a few times about taking things too fast, but Hisashi had a good reason for wanting to be back to work so fast. After everything he learned last time, it doesn't feel right to leave the little listener alone for so long. More than anything, Hisashi fears that the boy will end up thinking that Hisashi abandoned him. He'd never, but the boy wasn't sure of that. Hisashi fears that one more betrayal, even if it is just on the boy's mind, will tip him over the edge. More than anything, Hisashi just wants to meet him again and make sure he's fine. Or at least as fine as someone with such a horrible past could be. That's why Hisashi called on his radio today and asked them to put on a pre-recorded program today. Hisashi usually doesn't patrol on Fridays, but he can make an exception for today. As he approaches the rooftop where he usually meets the little listener, Hisashi's new sensible hearing catches on something, and he brings a hand to his ear, turning down his hearing blockers courtesy of Power Loader to be able to hear better. To his surprise, it's music. Pre-Quirk era music. There's only one radio that still plays this kind of music. His own. Slowing down, Hisashi approaches the rooftop and his eyes widen and soften at the same time as he sees the cutest thing he has ever seen since the time he found Sushi playing with a ball of yarn. On the rooftop, Spider Brat has his arms and spider legs spread as he spins around and jumps. There's a small radio on the floor playing the music and the kid is singing along as he dances. I need a hero. He sings and dances. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong, and he's gotta be fast, and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. Hisashi approaches silently and sits down on the neighboring rooftop, watching the scene with a soft smile. He has never seen the boy looking so peaceful like right now. I need a hero. He sings at the top of his lungs. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's gotta be sure, and it's gotta be soon, and he's gotta be larger than life. Larger than life. The music continues to play, and the boy twirls around, completely lost in the moment. For a while, the world seems to melt away, leaving only the rooftop, the music, and the pure innocence of the dance. It also feels like Hisashi is intruding. He's sure the boy doesn't know he's there and doesn't intend for him to see this. But Hisashi can't bring himself to turn away. So he stands there silently, watching the captivating scene. He also wonders if there's some hidden message to the song the boy is singing. The boy, who had repeatedly expressed his distrust of heroes, is here singing about holding out for a hero. Maybe it's because the song just happens to be playing. But it doesn't feel that simple. As the song nears its end and the boy begins to slow down, Hisashi makes a silent promise to himself. He will be the hero the boy was asking for. When the song is finished, the boy stops and plops down on the floor, panting but wearing a faint smile. Hisashi decides it's the right time to approach. He picks up the lunchbox he has prepared for the little listener and jumps to the rooftop where the boy is. As he lands, the boy tenses and sits down, immediately focusing on him. But a second later, he relaxes as he recognizes Hisashi. It warms Hisashi's heart. A few months ago, the boy wouldn't have relaxed around him. Big-san. The boy greets him, glancing at the radio that is still playing Hisashi's voice. I thought you'd be on the radio today. I've finally been cleared to patrol again, and I didn't want to wait, Hisashi explains. So they're playing a pre-recorded program. The boy nods at him and lies down again. How much did you see? He asks. You have a great voice, Hisashi replies with a reassuring smile. And those were some impressive moves. I'm quite flexible. The boy says. And I don't like silence. The admission catches Hisashi off guard. The boy rarely shows any kind of vulnerability, and this feels almost like the boy exposing his soul to Hisashi. It's small and weak, but it's trust. An ember of trust that Hisashi will never let die out. I'm glad my program can help with that, Hisashi says. That's the reason I started in the first place. I wanted to create a safe place where everyone could be heard. Anyone who calls at any point will be heard, be it to report a crime or just talk about their day. The boy arches his head, glancing at Hisashi. Sounds very nice. If I can help at least one person, all the effort is worth it, Hisashi says and puts the bag on the floor. Now, you must be hungry. There you go. It's Katsudon, lunch rushes special. The boy takes the lunchbox slowly and opens it. Hisashi doesn't comment on the wetness he sees in the boy's eyes as he starts eating. One day, this boy will stop crying at the smallest signs of kindness. One day he'll believe he deserves it. How are your ears? The boy asks. When my eyes mutated. It took me weeks to get used to keeping them closed during the day. Loud sounds still hurt, Hisashi says, not drawing much attention to the boy's words. When the boy is ready to tell him about the things he went through, Hisashi will be there to listen. But I'm getting used to it. Your idea worked, by the way. He turns his face so the boy can see the small devices in his ears. These can block sounds above a certain frequency, and they are adjustable. The boy sighs in relief and nods. That's good. He says. I would never want anyone to go through what I went through. He hesitantly looks up, something vulnerable in his eyes. Mix-san, can we? Hisashi's breath hitches, and he waits patiently for the boy to make up his mind. However, he shakes his head. No, it's nothing. Hisashi doesn't let his disappointment show. Instead, he smiles warmly at the boy. Whenever you're ready, little listener. He says. I'm sorry. The boy says, looking down and pushing the empty lunchbox. Whenever you're ready, little listener, Hisashi repeats. I mean it. I'll wait as long as I need to, even if that day never comes. The boy finally meets Hisashi's gaze, a mixture of longing and trepidation in his four eyes. He opens his mouth as if to say something, then hesitates. Hisashi doesn't hurry him, only waiting for the boy. Izuku. The boy says slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. My name is Izuku. Hisashi feels like crying, but he keeps his emotions in check. The boy has trusted him enough to share his name. That's probably the biggest step they ever took. Izuku nods, his eyes reflecting a mix of vulnerability and a glimmer of hope. Only when we are alone? It sounds more like a question. Like he's testing the waters. That's perfectly fine, Izuku, Hisashi replies with an encouraging smile. He knows just how hard it is for the boy to put this amount of trust in him. Hisashi decides that this should go both ways. My name is Yamada Hisashi. Yamada Hisashi. Izuku tests the name on his tongue. Yamada-san. You are the nicest adult I have ever met. I wish I had met you earlier. Maybe things could have been different. Izuku, Hisashi calls softly. I know you don't believe me yet. But I'll keep repeating until it sinks. It wasn't your fault and you're not a monster. You're a hurt kid and you deserve kindness. You deserve love. You're right, Izuku replies with a sigh. I don't believe you. He looks away, his voice heavy with the weight of his past. Not when all I see whenever I close my eyes are all the people I hurt. Their hateful stares. Their judging words. He glances at Hisashi, his gaze filled with pain. Yamada-san. I killed my first person when I was 4. He laughs bitterly, but Hisashi can't see the tears running down his cheeks. Every word about Izuku's life feels like a knife to Hisashi's chest. If he could, he would whisk this child away and provide the love and safety he desperately needs. But he knows it's not that simple, not until Izuku asks for help. For now, all he can offer are words. The past can't be changed, Hisashi says gently. It hurts, and it'll continue to hurt. It might never stop hurting, Izuku. But you're just a kid. You're not responsible for what they made you do. Wanting to live isn't a sin, Izuku. The first step to starting to heal is learning to let go. You deserve it, Izuku. You deserve kindness. You deserve love. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve a home. I want to believe you. He admits with teary eyes. But I don't know how. There's not much Hisashi can do right now. Words won't reach Izuku. He said it himself. Words are worthless. Hisashi opens his arms in a silent invitation and Izuku wraps his arms around Hisashi's neck, burying his face in Hisashi's shoulder as he sobs. Hisashi rubs his back comfortingly, being mindful of the spider legs so that they don't accidentally lash out. As he comforts the crying child, he can make out a few words Izuku cries between his sobs. Please, he says again and again. Don't betray me. Not you too. Never, Izuku. I promise you. Hisashi murmurs in his ear, even though he's not sure if the boy can hear him. Words are the only thing he can offer Izuku at the moment. It doesn't feel like it's enough. That's it for today guys, hope you enjoyed this, if you did then please make sure to leave a like, share and do check it out author of this fanfic. Take care. Thanks for watching.